All right, welcome to the conversation. We had an interesting guest for you guys. He's participated in a couple of movements you might recognize: Occupy Wall Street, Standing Rock, hashtag Bank Exit, 2017 California Poor People's Campaign. But you might have seen him on the program before as organizer and founder of Bank Exit, and we talked about how we can do public banks, etc. Jay Ponte. Jay, welcome back, brother.
Brother Cenk, great to see you.
No problem. So, hey, Jay, first question for you is, common misconception, and understandably so, is that Occupy didn't work, right? So what's your take on that? How do you see it differently?
Well, as with all things, we know that corporate media framed it that way specifically, and that we know how they drive specific narratives. But Occupy was a resounding success. It's important to also separate Occupy the movement from Occupy the tactic, which is to occupy a physical space. But the amount of movements and energy that came out of the Occupy movement fundamentally transformed the American landscape. We would not have the consciousness around the 99% versus the 1% movements like the fight for 15 for a living wage, for $15 an hour minimum wage. Strike debt came out of that. The divestment and public banking movements were really energized by that. And moreover, it fundamentally changed Americans' context around resistance, made it okay to go and protest without a permit. So I'd say, and I would say ultimately, probably the biggest impact was Bernie Sanders. The Bernie Sanders campaign was a direct result of Occupy Wall Street, not just obliquely, but a direct result of Occupy Wall Street activists who pushed Bernie to run.
So I know you're writing a book, and you connect those two things in the book. So help me understand that, or help the audience understand that. Why are those two things connected?
Well, I think the common mythos is that Bernie came out of the free market and he just went viral and his message just resonated. All of those things are true, but the extent to which Bernie caught fire was a direct result of specific tactical organizing efforts of a group of Occupy Wall Street activists, was known as the People for Bernie Sanders. And they actually messaged the entire Occupy mailing list. They had a bunch of, Occupy organizers on board with that mobilization. And essentially they had before Bernie even announced, they held events called the 99 events for the 99%. It was a big call to action. And some of those initial calls, house parties and calls became, Black Men for Bernie, different cities or regions for Bernie. A lot of those different groups, those affinity groups came out directly out of that organizing effort. Simultaneously, you had another group called Progressive Democrats of America, who was also bird dogging Bernie and basically traveling around the country, following him and saying, Bernie, we need you to run. And so it was a specific, Bernie would not have run without seeing that the grassroots movement to forward his agenda, especially to take on the Clinton machine, just would not have happened without that energy being there. So he was directly pushed by Occupy Wall Street activists who saw a Clinton administration as potentially what it was. What it was really a furthering of militarism, imperialism, Wall Street hegemony, and all of the other things that this country what it is.
So I remember when I interviewed Bernie in 2016, I asked him, when was the moment that you knew you had a shot at actually winning? And he said that he'd gone to a rally, I think it was Minnesota, but I'm not sure. And he said there's this line around the corner, giant crowd. And he turned to his advisor and said, who's got a concert after me? Who are they here for? And they're like, no, Bernie, they're here for you. And he was like, what in the world, right? Now, but Jay, I'm curious about the chicken and egg, right? To what degree is it the activist, and to what degree is it the zeitgeist? So, because like, I remember being amazed that Occupy was put together and succeeded in getting all those people there and getting the press attention, because the progressives are notoriously hard to organize. And whenever I asked anybody, they'd always say like, it was the moment. It was the moment. Like everybody showed up because they were, proverbial sick and tired, right, of the situation. So what's your take on that? Yeah.
Well, it's a combination of both. And a lot of, I think progressives would really benefit everyone if we learned our movement history. There's a terrific book called This Is an Uprising, written by Mark and Paul Engler. I should probably see it over my shoulder, where they talk a lot about the whirlwind. And yes, it is a zeitgeist moment. There are moments where, it's a little more geared towards the status quo. Then there are moments where it's like a powder keg. Now, for organizers, it behooves us to know when to capitalize on those movements and when to mobilize our networks and to engage the proper tactics to really take advantage of those, moments, those trigger events.
Okay, so yeah, I noticed the books behind you, including Capital, huh? Looks like Karl Marx wrote a book. Anyways, so
No, it's Piketty. It basically proves that trickle down economics is a canard, basically.
Yeah, of course. So in your book, Be the Revolution: How Occupy Wall Street and the Bernie Sanders Movement Reshaped American Politics, you talk about a bunch of things, and there's a couple more things I wanted to ask you about that because I found it so interesting. You talked about these secret Bernie Avengers. What? Who are they? They sound super fun.
Yeah, it was a group that we put together of activists, organizers, Hollywood professionals to essentially recruit a surrogate team for Bernie, and then we organized that team to do actions around the country. Like we created the Bernie's Diner in Los Angeles. We did the Clooney Counterparty, where when we threw the money at Hillary Clinton's motorcade outside of the George Clooney $33,000 a plate fundraiser, which, by the way, you were one of the only outlets that actually defended us when we were smeared by the corporate news. It was an absolute hatchet job. And we organized at the convention, we organized the platform committee, and it was we both recruited and organized a lot of the surrogates that you saw Stump for Bernie or bands that opened for Bernie. So it was to help the campaign in that way.
So we covered both of those, the diner and the campaign event. And it's always the same old tricks, right? So you guys went to draw attention to Hillary Clinton's donors, and hence you threw the money. And then it's sexist. What, right? And then Janet Yellen got $7 million from speaking fees to banks and other corporations. And then when we pointed out, they're like sexist. But that doesn't make any sense at all. Men do corruption, women do corruption. It has nothing to do with their gender. It has everything to do with the corruption. And I want people to understand that when you see Bernie's Diner, as almost everybody in LA did, that doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes from somebody organizing it. There's like this sense of like community organizer has almost like a mystical feel to it. It just means you organize things, right? You put things together and you bring people together. So which then of course leads to the next question, which is, but Jay, we've done this organizing for a while, and we have seen the results in that, hey, Bernie almost won twice, right? And yeah, he didn't pull it off, but like 20 years ago, 10 years ago, that would have been unthinkable, no chance at all, right? And so you see the momentum, I see the momentum, and we chronicle it all the time. But that leads to the question of, but people say, how long is it gonna take? Especially when we have like losses like Nina Turner's. And it's like gut wrenching. And people keep wondering, when do we win?
For me, I look at the progress that we've made just since Occupy alone, and it's astonishing. I think a lot of people were activated by the Bernie 2016 campaign or the Bernie 2020 campaign. And it makes sense to me why people would feel demoralized. But going back to 2004, there wasn't even anything called a progressive movement until a number of activists out of the Dennis Kucinich campaign started groups like Progressive Democrats of America and others. But for me, I think this represents we're at an absolute critical moment where our leftist movements and our organizers and those who would consider themselves progressives or leftists, we get to take a good hard look at ourselves and stop the infighting and see where we can come together to build coalitions, to fight for policy, and to keep winning, especially in you call it a post-Bernie world.
All right, Jay Ponte, organizing behind the scenes, making some of the things that you see visibly happen, along with so many other wonderful organizers. Thank you for joining us, Jay. We appreciate it.
Yeah, and I just want to mention that the 10th anniversary of Occupy Wall Street is coming up on September 17th and 18th. There's a link tree that we have set up for Occupy 2.0. You can follow the Occupy Wall Street main Facebook pages and Twitter to find out more. We have an event in LA at 6 p.m. on Friday. Come down for a general assembly to have your voice heard. On Saturday, there'll be a march and rally, and it's a beautiful coalition event. We're going to take every COVID precaution, but we invite everybody to come out, tune into the live stream, and we hope to see everybody out for the 10th anniversary of Occupy Wall Street.
Absolutely, it's also the 10th anniversary of Wolfpack, so a lot to celebrate there because we started Wolfpack.
And you were out there. I heard you were out at Occupy Wall Street. I heard you were out there.
Oh, absolutely. That's where we started the Wolfpack to get money out of politics. All right, Jay Ponte, thank you, brother.
And thank you, Cenk, for uplifting those events. These platforms are important. All of our progressive platforms are important because I don't know if you noticed, but corporate news doesn't exactly cover our direct actions and cover a lot of our campaigns. So, the piece you did on public banking was an important moment, I think, to get that into the popular consciousness. So I want to also thank you for your organizing work on Justice Democrats, and also, it's nice when you get attacked by corporate news to have someone tell the truth.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that.
We're very honest that we're progressives. We call the Young Turks home of progressives, and we support progressive candidates.
There has been this reemergence of political activism, especially among young people.
This weekend was the second Women's March, both across the US and across the world. So these people are not simply marching, they're not simply talking, they're also running for office. And when they do run, they're gonna make a difference.
Joe Crowley is congressman from New York. He's very powerful. Why? He raised a lot of money. But there's someone finally challenging him.
We need to have representation that advocates as fiercely for working class people as possible from this seat.
If candidates like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez even get a little bit of media attention outside of what the Young Turks does, they have an excellent chance of winning.
She's gonna win. She's gonna win.
68% reporting.
The majority of Americans want Medicare for all. So I don't care what you and your corporate cronies want. What I care about is what the American people want.
We believe in total change. Everything runs on donor money. And that is what we will fight, and that is exactly why they don't like us.
We're having fun, it's election night!
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has defeated Joe Crowley.
Here we go again!
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Down goes Crowley! Down goes Crowley! Down goes Manafort! Down goes Cohen!
Women came out in record numbers in the primaries.
They said, you'll be lucky to get one candidate. We now have 12 that have won their primaries. Bezos and Amazon announcing that they are going to go to a 15-hour minimum wage.
We're making progress, let's keep going.
Many of these women made history.
The biggest victories, all women of color. Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland.
And I want to go to Congress because I want to change those things.
I'm calling it. Jamal Bowman has won. Down goes Engel! Down goes Engel!
For a long time, we have not had progressives in power. It's going to be something to behold.
Welcome to Happy Hour, everybody. After a week of soul-crushing news, we break out the good stuff. Good news, good videos, good people, and of course, drink good alcohol. That's the worst thing I've ever had.
This is the best show.
Full disclosure, we did do a shot right before the show began. It says, let's flamingo.
Flamingo.
The reason you had trouble with that word is it's not a word. Okay. This is the one of everything.
I've got a rash. Could I just put it on that to see if it'll take it off?
What did you used to think this was?
Bull piss.
Drink it, swallow it, spit it. Oh, that's needed after a day like this. Cheers to Brett Ehrlich. Climax.
Uranus smells like farts.
Because of course it does. This is the worst sketch ever of a perp. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? They found the guy. This is Sophie's super happy dog story of the week.
This dog is so precious and deserves the world. I'm just not drinking that beer.
Here's my dog. This is Onyx.
Yeah, I would just say that he's exotic because he's not your traditional dog. Still 12 out of 10 because they're all good.
Well, if that made you happy, just wait till you see the best thing ever of the week. There is a woman who moves like a horse.
Why do I want to go home and like try this?
We're actually going to show you the running butthole challenge right now. What's happening? No, that's just wrong every way. And we'll see you next time.
Hey Dave, as you can probably see, Skype froze. Frozen crashed.
You know, I'm watching that documentary on the Vietnam War, and there was a TV journalist in the middle of some tiny little village in Vietnam doing live TV as the soldiers were burning the Vietnamese huts, and it didn't crash. And that was 1965, and he was in Vietnam.
You guys remember Morgan Harper? She ran as a Just Democrat in Ohio for the House. She worked the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. She had a bit of an education, Tufts, Princeton, Stanford, not a big deal. She organized and founded Columbus Stand Up. That's a grassroots community organization that mobilizes volunteers. She does good work. She's a wonderful person. You know what she decided to do? She's running for Senate, okay? So, you know what else she's doing? Joining us, Morgan Harper, everybody. How you doing, Morgan?
Hey, good, how are you?
I'm good, I'm good. Craig, our stage manager here, remembered you because as we're about to do the interview, he said, is it time to Morganize?
It's absolutely time to Morganize, so yes. Craig, we need you.
Yes. So Morgan, lots of questions here. I'm in a weird mood here, so I'm going to start with a fun question. You're running for the Ohio Senate seat. We're going to get to the Democratic primary, but first, in the Republican primary, since Rob Portman's retiring, we have two, in my opinion, nut jobs: JD Vance and Josh Mandel. So, who is crazier, Vance or Mandel?
That's a tough question to answer. And you have touched on the main point of why I'm running though, because the threat on the right is pretty extreme at this point. And we as Democrats haven't been doing a great job of winning in the state of Ohio. And we need to do that because both of them represent, I would say, existential threats to our democracy. And they are nothing to advance our government closer to delivering real change for our communities.
No, Morgan, that's what I'm worried about. I'm worried that they're going to win and we're going to have like a full-blown lunatic in the Senate. I mean, we already have a bunch, but Vance or Mandel would not help the cause. And they're both, of course, have a competition to who could lick Trump's boots better and more effectively and efficiently. To help me understand what's happening in Ohio. So Ohio used to be a swing state, but in the last couple of elections, it's pretty much stopped swinging. And it's gone more significantly in the Republican column. So why? Why did it do that?
Well, I would say that it is still a swing state, but we need to be taking the data and the results that we're seeing and applying it to develop our strategies to move forward to win. And one of the things that we're seeing is that the career politician types in the state of Ohio, especially for these federal seats as Democrats, are not winning. And if you can't mobilize a lot of key constituencies across the state, Black voters, other communities of color, working class voters, you are not going to have the numbers to pull off a victory here. And like we were just talking about, the stakes are very high. We need to flip this seat and protect the Democratic majority in the US Senate. And and that's what we're also saying through our campaign, and a message we're going to be mobilizing throughout the state is we're not going to be able to turn out these people who are inconsistent voters, who have floated away from the party entirely, by presenting someone who is in bed with corporate interests, who's taking corporate money. The Republicans actually in this race are saying no corporate PAC money. They're gonna stand up to big tech. They're gonna take on big corporations, fight for the little guy. It's nonsense, and we need to have an alternative that actually, I was talking about myself here, that has a track record of doing that, having worked at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, actually trying to take on big tech to have government implement legislation and do something. The only way we have a chance to counter this message and the threat on the right in the state of Ohio and win is by having a true progressive and a mobilization strategy, grassroots across the state to turn out the people that we need to vote.
Okay, so let's keep it real. Tim Ryan is in the primary with you, and he was in the race earlier, and so he's more of a established and establishment Democrat, and so his argument's going to be, well, okay, yeah, I took corporate money, but I raised a lot of money. I raised $2 million, and that money's going to help me win. And then I'm going to go and say his main thing is Ohio workers and etc. So why is that not a winning strategy?
We win by getting people to vote for us. That's a pretty key point, right? We don't win by raising a lot of money. I think if last cycle showed us anything, especially in a lot of these Senate races, is that raising a ton of money is not guaranteeing success in order for Democrats to win statewide in some of the states. And also, what we saw here in Ohio, President Biden, though he won overall, did worse than Hillary Clinton in the state of Ohio. And so we need to be real and again, look at the facts. The facts are that running the same playbook in the state of Ohio, moderate politicians, centrist politicians that are taking corporate money are not winning. And who has been able to win in this state over the past 15 years? It's people like Sherrod Brown. This is not someone who is trying to hide the fact that he's progressive or going to stand up to corporate interests, right? And so that is our playbook for winning, in addition to mobilizing the people we need to turn out across the state. And that's not something that can be done in a shortcut sort of way. It's door by door, it's block by block, it's building the infrastructure, it's building the authentic relationships that will inspire people to turn out and win, make young people want to care about this race. We have a lot of colleges and universities here. That's a big part. And then also Black voters. I'm gonna really hit that over the head because we need to recognize that our community is the core of our base. And if we're not paying attention and if we're not voting, we will not win. That should not be an afterthought. That has to be front and center in any Democratic campaign in this state that is trying to win. And so that's something that we're going to be very focused on, in addition to a lot of other constituencies that will be mobilizing to turn out. And we have to do it. And there's no other option at this point. We need to recognize that being progressive, being bold, sticking to our values, having someone who's willing to stand up to powerful interests is the way that we're going to get a message that will turn people out in November.
So the point about Sherrod Brown is excellent. It's almost like you went to Stanford Law School. Because Ohio's continuing to lean red in national elections, as you pointed out, Biden did even worse than Hillary Clinton. But yet you have one of the most progressive senators in the country, and I would argue maybe the most pro-union, pro-labor senators. So there's a dichotomy there. It's almost as if it's not about Democrats or Republicans. It's populist versus establishment candidates. So now, Tim Ryan, I've known for a long time, and he's got his ups, he's got his downs, but clearly he's not a populist. He's against Medicare for all. He made that clear in the campaign trail. He, in fact, in an interview with me, and against Green New Deal, etc. So, how would you run a populist campaign, Morgan?
Well, it's the same issues that I've been talking about since I ran in the congressional race too. In many ways, things have only gotten more precarious for a lot of people. So I'm sticking to what I've always stood for, that we need to have universal access to healthcare. This is a must, that we need to be addressing the climate crisis. We're seeing here, even in the Midwest, where I think folks like to believe that somehow we were going to be immune from the effects of climate change, increasing flooding, housing costs related to these weather changes and extreme weather events. And so we need to just be real with people about what's going on and the policies that will actually solve the problems. And that is what we are going to communicate to voters across the state, workers, small business owners, people who understand the economic system has been rigged against us being those who have to continue to work, to live, and that we need real change for our communities, and it needs to happen now.
Yeah, I see in your platform, and you have one. Most establishment candidates don't have one. Most progressives do because you care about policy. And so you have one, of course, and you mentioned universal health care, universal child care, and universal education. But Morgan, if we do all that, how are we gonna pay for all the wars?
Well, this has been a very heavy week in many ways, or really last couple of weeks. And I think we're seeing that the foreign policy establishment has led us into a path over the last 20 years, my entire adult lifetime, of wasted money, resources, lives built on strategy that did not make any sense from the beginning. And so, that's one important thing that we need to move away from and start to prioritize, really focusing on our communities and supporting each other and getting the resources that people are going to need to lead stable lives. That's a big part of what, the platform that we're talking about. I think that's what people across the state want to hear, that we're going to be focused on policies that are about serving our communities and delivering change that is long overdue.
MorganHarper.org, everybody go check it out. Morgan, thank you so much for joining us again, appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Cenk.
All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian with you guys. Amazing stories today in the news, including how ivermectin scams are being run. And
the profit motive behind prescribing ivermectin, because yes, that profit motive does in fact exist. Time Magazine did an incredible investigation into it, and we have details that we'll share with you guys in the second hour. That's probably my favorite story of the day because it answered a question I've had in my mind ever since we started hearing about ivermectin. Where did these, where did these claims come from? What motivated them? We'll give you those details and more later in the show.
Yeah, so look, the media, ranging from right-wing social media to mainstream media, especially on foreign policy, it's just filled to the rim with lies and misleading ways of framing things on and on. So good news, we're gonna break it down for you guys. So let's get started, Casper.
9 members of the same family in Afghanistan died following a drone strike that was done by the United States in order to essentially target a member of ISIS-K who posed an imminent threat to people in the Kabul airport. Now, that is what the Pentagon is alleging, but when you look at the number of casualties here, innocent lives that are lost, it gives you a sense of just how often and how brazenly the United States engages in these drone strikes, which leads to literal children being killed. So let me give you the details. The US Central Command claims that the target posed an imminent threat, as I mentioned, to the airport as the US continues to rush to evacuate people. Now, the youngest civilian who was killed in this drone strike, and it was the second drone strike, by the way, in recent days, was a 2-year-old girl, according to the brother of one of those killed. They were an ordinary family, he said. We are not ISIS or Daesh and this was a family home where my brothers lived with their families. The other children who were killed in this drone strike were ages 3, 4, 9, and 10. In fact, one neighbor spoke of the family and told CNN, quote, "All the neighbors tried to help and brought water to put out the fire. And I saw that there were 5 or 6 people dead. The father of the family and another young boy, and there were 2 young children. They were dead. They were in pieces. There were also 2 wounded. And by the way, I should note that the United States is trying to make it appear as though the drone strike is not necessarily to blame for the death of this family, 9 members of this one family. By the way, the total number of civilian casualties is 10, as far as we know. It could go up. Now, the US, as I mentioned, is trying to make it seem like, well, the initial drone strike might not be the cause of the civilian fatalities here. Bill Urban, a spokesperson for the US Central Command, argued that, quote, "We know that there were substantial and powerful subsequent explosions resulting from the destruction of the vehicle," meaning the vehicle that they targeted with the explosives and the alleged terrorist, "indicating a large amount of explosive material inside that may have caused additional casualties. It is unclear what may have happened and we are investigating further. We would be deeply saddened by any potential loss of innocent life." And let me be clear, it's not potential loss of innocent life. Innocent people were killed, civilians were killed, including several children, ages 2, 3, 4, 9, and 10. Cenk.
Yeah, so there's 2 elements to this story. One is the substance of what American foreign policy, the other is how American media covers it. Later, we're gonna do a story about how the Taliban has taken over media in Afghanistan. There's guys with rifles standing behind the newscaster, right? But our guys are way, way more subtle than that. But their framing is, well, nefarious nonetheless. So let me explain. So first of all, 7 kids dead. If ISIS had killed 7 kids, let alone all the other civilians, how would the American media frame that? Brutal killers, ISIS. Well, ISIS would say, well, we did it for our own purposes, to achieve our purposes. And we, of course, think those purposes are horrible, right? But America says the same thing. We're doing it to achieve our purposes. But the difference is the media says rightfully, well, ISIS's purposes are absurd. And you can't kill 7 kids to achieve your purpose. That's not a right ends to a mean, or right means to an end, I should say. But when America does it, the media immediately takes it as, well, I mean, it was means to an end. They had to achieve their purpose. They were trying to attack an ISIS bomber. It turns out there was a family nearby, and they all exploded, and their body parts were. The report explains it. Body parts of the kids strewn all over the place.
I mean, when you really think about it, though, Cenk, the U.S. government is at least consistent, and I'm not giving them brownie points for this, but they are consistent in regard to targeting who they want to target, regardless of the innocent lives that will be lost in whatever drone strike or whatever bombing they do. I mean, they defend the Israeli government over and over and over again when hospitals are bombed or when schools are bombed, either in the Gaza Strip or the West Bank. And the argument that they make is that, well, you have Hamas fighters who are using these innocent civilians as human shields. And as a result, we gotta do what we gotta do. We gotta target what we believe to be a threat. And so that's exactly what the US government is doing here, right? They refer to civilian casualties as collateral damage. This is a long-standing phrase that's been used in regard to literal children who have died as a result of these drone strikes or missile strikes or whatever their preferred weapon of choice is when they carry out these missions. But there are consequences to that.
Yeah, and so guys, it's easy to understand if you put the shoe on the other foot. So for example, in America here, every once in a while we have to do an easement. So a highway needs to go through that property, we need to buy that property, and so we're gonna give you a certain amount of money to compensate you for it. Now, a lot of times people are furious about that because it sometimes is used for the wall, sometimes it's used for a mall, right? And people say that's taking my freedom away. Now imagine if the government said, hey look, there's some dangerous people in your neighborhood, so we had to murder 7 of your kids. Oh, it's not a big deal, it's just an easement. It's collateral damage. We had to murder 7 of your kids. Now, who in America would accept that? No one, no one. It would be up in arms, it would be the biggest scandal in history. We take 7 kids in one bombing. By the way, we've killed thousands upon thousands of children through our drone strikes. And it's barely noted. Again, CNN calls it, the US carried a defensive airstrike in Kabul. Well, if they say so, right? Well, it seemed pretty offensive to that family, not just defensive. So we value their lives and their kids' lives a lot less. Now, that's obvious. There's no question about that. Even if you're a right-winger, you're probably agreeing, saying, yeah, but I didn't want them to attack. And if a family had to be killed, at least it protects me or our service members, and so hence I don't care. But you can't argue that we don't kill them and on a regular basis and with little deference for their lives. And you can't argue that we wouldn't do it here in America if we just dropped a bomb and murdered a family like that and said, well, we had to do it. It's just like, collateral damage, no big deal. Everybody would be rightfully furious. Now, but on the media, and I have a couple more points here. They're the ones who ginned up the need to strike ISIS in the first place.
Right.
So every time either Jen Psaki or Joe Biden went up to the podium, they were like, what are you gonna do about ISIS-K? Are you gonna murder them yet? Why aren't you killing them? What are you doing about the Taliban? How come are you gonna go back in? You're not going back in. Are you gonna let this stand? So Biden had to come out, if you remember. We chastised him for it. We've supported him for the withdrawal throughout, but he came out and said, we're gonna kill the hell out of them, right? Because this is the dumb stuff that happens in America. And when we're bloodthirsty, everybody applauds. When the other guys do it, oh my God, barbaric terrorists. They are. But what are we? What are we? But our media never asked that question because that's an uncomfortable question. In fact, they do the opposite.
Right.
They egg on the violence. And then, by the way, this report's in the media, which told you I just quoted CNN, right? But what happens? They quote it, they give the Pentagon perspective, and then they have collective amnesia. And the next time that, for example, a brutal dictator like Assad does a chemical weapons attack and some kids die, we're all rightfully outraged, right? And then the media takes the pictures and puts them all over television. Oh, kids dead, kids dead, kids dead. We have to do the bombing. We have to do the bombing. When is Trump gonna do the bombing, right? And then when he does it, they go, oh, beautiful bombs, beautiful bombs. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't be outraged by Assad's actions. We're pretty clear on the record that you should be outraged by that. I'm not, and Taliban and ISIS, you should definitely be outraged. But we should also think about our own actions. And we should be outraged when we kill civilians and kids. And we should be outraged that our media is not at all even-handed about it.
Right.
It almost sounds like they have an agenda for more war, both in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, you name it. And whenever it suits their agenda for more war, they show dead kids on the screen.
Right.
Whenever it doesn't suit their agenda, no dead kids on the screen.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right about that. And look, I think that these types of stories and these types of discussions are important to have because it's not in any way an attempt to launder the reputations of terrorists there. But it is, in my opinion, also a foreshadowing moment because it makes me worry that while there are headlines everywhere, I'm getting news alerts nonstop about how we've withdrawn completely. Today marks the final day of our war in Afghanistan. I don't believe that it's our final day of war in Afghanistan. So obviously they like to make a distinction regarding boots on the ground versus doing airstrikes and drone strikes. Implementing sanctions. There are different ways of engaging in war. And the fact that you have members of the media and various pundits on cable news urging the Biden administration to retaliate against ISIS, it's all about continuing the war, but in a different form. Maybe we don't have US troops there, but at the same time, we're gonna continue carrying out airstrikes or drone strikes. And part of the problem is we're not really getting much transparency from the Biden administration or the Pentagon in regard to what they plan on doing. Biden had a lot of tough talk for ISIS-K. He said that he would retaliate, that they would pay for what they did, but there have been really no details about what this alleged counterterrorism strategy really is. And I'm worried that this will just be like a different form and a continuation of the war in Afghanistan. And by the way, we're supposed to be cooperating with the Taliban to get people out of Afghanistan. The Taliban wasn't notified about this at all. So they were angry that the United States carried out this operation without notifying them, without talking to them. The Taliban, which is now in control of Afghanistan, condemned the strike later Sunday, saying the US had violated the country's sovereignty. Bilal Karimi, the Taliban spokesperson, said that it was not right to conduct operations on other soil and that the US should have informed the Taliban. Whenever the US conducts such operations, we condemn them. Now, I have no love for the Taliban, of course I don't, but remember, the Taliban and ISIS, they're enemies, they're rivals, they do not get along. And to your point, Cenk, the media has been trying to somehow persuade Americans that the Taliban and ISIS are working together, basically to convince Americans or to manufacture consent to remain in Afghanistan.
Yeah, and there's another element to it too. I mean, now of course there's a little bit of bigotry mixed in there. ISIS, Taliban, they're all Muslims, who can tell, right? And by the way, the Palestinians also Muslims, and all Muslims understand is violence. That's why you have to occupy them forever, whether it's 20 years in Afghanistan or 50, 60 years in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. So this is a very familiar theme that the media has built up over a long period of time. So don't tell me that our media doesn't support violence. Yeah, on Afghan television, there might be a couple of rifles in the back, but in our case, we are way more sophisticated in pushing massive bombings and invasions of countries that lead to a lot more deaths, and we do it through our media. So, and now on the Taliban and ISIS, look, we're forced to state obvious things because of the demagoguing in the media in America and by the right wing. So who would the Taliban and ISIS kill first? Well, me and Anna, all right? They would kill me because I'm a apostate Muslim. I left Islam. It's the worst thing there is. They'd kill me first. And then Anna, being a woman and being strong and open, etc.
Pretty mouthy, yeah.
Yeah, we're goners. So are we in favor of Taliban or ISIS? Of course not, right? Now, having said that, should we coordinate with Taliban? Of course we should. They're telling us, they're giving us a relatively safe exit out, and they haven't done any bombings. If they had started to do bombings, we wouldn't have 13 service members dead. We would have had hundreds dead. We would have had thousands of our Afghan allies dead already. We made a deal. We made a deal with people who were our enemies. That's who you make deals with. And ISIS-K is the one that attacked us. So should we coordinate with the Taliban against a worse enemy of ISIS-K? Yes, for the moment being, we should. For example, Stalin was a terrible, terrible dictator. And we made a deal with him to fight Hitler, who was worse.
Yeah.
That's called real life. But if you do that in America, oh my God, Biden made a deal with the Taliban. This is how dumb our media is. Biden made a deal with the Taliban. I guess he's a Muslim fundamentalist. He likes terrorism. And then you have to bother debating guys that are, let's put it this way, that have no honest intent at all.
Exactly, they have profit motives in mind. And that's what's fueling much of the discourse that you see in corporate media. Well, let's move on to an exchange that I thought was pretty interesting, and I wanted to talk about why it's problematic. So, following multiple US-led drone strikes in Afghanistan, including one that led to the deaths of multiple children, the Biden administration continues to lack transparency on what it plans to do in its so-called counterterrorism strategy against ISIS-K. Now, the suicide bombings were carried out by ISIS-K. There's been, these calls for the Biden administration to retaliate, but what is the effort? What is the counterterrorism effort? What does the Biden administration or the Pentagon plan to do? Well, during a recent press conference, NBC's Courtney Kube asked a Pentagon spokesperson, John Kirby, what they're planning on doing, but more importantly, if they plan to coordinate with the Taliban, which, let me note, has control over Afghanistan and is an enemy of ISIS. Let's hear how that conversation went down.
A little bit more on the continuing strike from ISIS-K. After the US is completely out on the 31st, will you coordinate with the Taliban or give them notice if you plan to conduct more strikes against ISIS?
I don't think it's useful to get into hypothetical operations, future operations one way or the other. The only thing I would tell you is that the president has made it very clear that we will maintain robust over-the-horizon counterterrorism capability, the kinds of capabilities that you've seen us use in just the last 24, 36 hours, and we'll have the ability to act in ways that are in keeping with our national security interests and help prevent attacks on the homeland. We still have that capability. We will use that capability.
What's not hypothetical is the fact that the U.S. military has been coordinating with the Taliban on the ground for the last 2 weeks or so. So to ask if you were going to continue coordinating with them, in this case against ISIS-K, isn't hypothetical. Will you continue to coordinate with the Taliban after August 31st?
I beg to differ. I actually think your question is entirely hypothetical about something that is entirely different than what we've been coordinating with the Taliban on over the last 2 weeks, which has been to help us get as many people onto that airport as possible. I do appreciate the sense of the question. I'm not trying to mock it. It's just that I don't think it's helpful for us to talk about what over-the-horizon counterterrorism capability is going to look like going forward and how we're going to execute it. Suffice it to say, we have the capability. We've demonstrated that over just the last couple of days in strikes that were not coordinated with the Taliban, and we have that ability to go forward.
No, we know that the US government has military capability to strike whatever target they want to strike while simultaneously killing civilians on the ground, which are then later referred to as collateral damage. But the question, I think, is a valid question. The question is, okay, like it's what I've been wondering about, what I want to know about. So Biden has all this tough talk regarding ISIS-K and how we're going to essentially go after them for the suicide bombings that took place at the Kabul airport, right? Which killed 13 US service members. What does that mean? The American people deserve to know what that counterterrorism strategy is and whether we're going to continue engaging in this war in Afghanistan just in a different form, right? Because that's what it appears to be. We have military involvement in various countries that Americans aren't even fully aware of. Remember, under the Trump administration, a US service member died in Niger. And people are like, what are we doing in Niger, right? We're all over the place. And the American people deserve to know what their taxpayer money is funding, not just in Afghanistan, but all over the world. But you don't get a straight answer from the Pentagon.
Yeah, so there's a lot of issues here. So first off, it's definitely not a hypothetical. This is the end of the month. So what are you doing tomorrow is not a hypothetical. And the problem is, he's worried that it's a gotcha question. And unfortunately with the American media, it oftentimes is. And because if he says, yeah, we're gonna continue to coordinate with the Taliban, which would be the correct answer, because they didn't hit us, ISIS-K hit us, and ISIS and Taliban are mortal enemies and they hate each other. So the Taliban could give us information about how to strike back, for at least on the 13 service members that were killed. But if you gave that perfectly reasonable answer, Yeah, a lot of the media, certainly Fox News, but a lot of the mainstream media would rip you to shreds. They're working with the Taliban. The Biden is in bed with the terrorists, let alone social media and the memes that would come out of it. So our officials have to be purposely unintelligent, or at least give that appearance out. The Taliban coordinate with them. What name so? That sounds like a hypothetical. No, it's not, and you know it. And he kept, and by the way, because of the same media pressures and political pressures, you saw him there bragging constantly about our quote unquote over the horizon capabilities. What that means is, yeah, it's far away, hence it's over the horizon. We're not gonna put boots on the ground. We're gonna send in drones and maybe different Air Force planes as well, but mainly drones. And we're gonna kill them from the sky. And he's bragging about it. You saw how we did it. You saw how we did it. Well, we just reported on it as the earlier story. Well, the way you did it was you accidentally bombed a family and killed 7 children and many civilians. So that's not really a thing to brag about. But notice they're asking him, are you coordinating with the Taliban so they can attack him later? But it doesn't look like anybody asked him about the dead kids. He gets to brag about it,
right?
And people in the room are like, "Oh, bravo! At least he killed the 7 kids. You got to give him credit for that. Nice job on that." Nobody goes, "Hey, well, this is outrageous. We found pictures of the body parts strewn all over the house of this poor family that was totally innocent. According to the neighbors, had nothing to do with any of these groups, and they were killed by us." No questions. By the way,
it's crazy. No, I got to add something else to it. I mean, look, are you going to coordinate with the Taliban? And we don't get a straight answer on it. So is Afghanistan a sovereign country or not? Is it? Because if you respect it as a sovereign nation, then you have no choice but to coordinate with whatever group controls that country. And whether you like it or not, the Taliban controls that country and they happen to be enemies of ISIS. So why wouldn't we coordinate with them? Why wouldn't we share intel if we genuinely want to do these targeted attacks against anyone that poses a threat to the United States? Like, it's just like the thinking behind this. I mean, just imagine, put it in our own terms, right? Let's say, I don't know, some random country decides that the right-wing domestic terrorists that we have here pose a threat. And they decide they're gonna do drone strikes in the United States on US soil, and they're not gonna notify the United States government about it. How would Americans feel about that? How would Americans feel about that if people in any given neighborhood, civilians, died as a result of those attacks?
Yeah.
I mean, or even the alleged terrorists, like domestic terrorists, right? Are you okay with another country deciding that our sovereignty means nothing, and they're gonna go ahead and carry out these attacks against groups of people they don't like in the US?
Yeah.
Why are we okay with doing that? Why is it okay for us to do that?
And by the way, we've found out through the BBC that it sounds like there's a good chance that a lot of the 169 Afghan civilians that were killed during the ISIS-K bombing were killed by us. Allied soldiers, both American and apparently Turkish soldiers on the scene, fired, according to witnesses, indiscriminately into the crowd, killing the people trying to get into the airport, who are largely our Afghan allies. So when the bombing goes off, they panic and they fire into the crowd and kill hundreds of civilians. So were there heated questions about that? My God, why did you murder our own allies? No, the question is, are you working with the Taliban? And then, oh, wait a minute, what are your over the horizon capabilities? And so the guy comes, I'm not working with them, but I'll tell you, I'll bomb them, I'll bomb the civilians, I'll kill the civilians. And then the press cheers, yeah. And that's the insane country we live in. So, the Taliban's violent. They are. They're terrible. They are. What are we? We're not violent. We invaded that country and we occupied it for 20 years, and we're killing plenty of civilians on our way out.
I mean,
if it's really our way out.
At least 120 Afghans died that day. Barely even gets a mention in the press. Anyway, we got to take a break. When we come back, we'll switch gears and talk a little bit about September 1st, which means that Texas's anti-abortion law will come into effect. What does that mean? We'll give you the details on that and more.
All right, back during the social break, let's read some member comments. A bucket full of dragons writes in, ruthless calculus should not be the first course of action. Oh, in America it almost always is, but of course you're right, it shouldn't be. Meg writes in, and we wonder why some people hate us. It's not because of our freedom. Of course, Meg, of course you're right. But you're more right than the rest of the media combined. I mean, they say stuff like that without any hesitation. I mean, the one that of course rings in my ear all the time is Joe Scarborough many years ago talking about so-called terrorists in the Middle East. God knows what he was referring to at the time, saying they hate us because they hate us. They hate us because they hate us. They hate us because they hate us. He said it 3 times.
I thought that was Bill Maher.
No, that was Joe Scarborough.
Oh, my bad.
But what difference does it make? Almost everybody in mainstream media says idiotic talking points like this. Bill Maher is the one that said Israel was right to attack Hamas back in 2014, and that Hamas was like a petulant girlfriend who needed to be tied up and slapped around so she understood what violence was about. So that's Bill Maher, the liberal on TV, the liberal. And by the way, Morning Joe is on the liberal network, MSNBC. So I do declare, by the way, get the exact quote online. I paraphrase what Maher said. I mean, you guys can look it up. I do declare, it says the Taliban does reporting with people with rifles in the background, unacceptable. US media is paid off by faceless corporations to manufacture consent with dark money, acceptable. Yeah, and by the way, the corporations that are paying them have much, much larger weapons than the Taliban did in that shot. We'll talk more about that later in the program. Tattered Remnant said, Americans are unfazed by their fellow citizens dying of a deadly disease that is being spread by morons in our own governments. They could care less about Afghans.
Totally.
That's a very fair point. Ask a right winger to care about a left winger. He'll die to own the libs. So what do you think he'll do to the Afghans?
I mean, look, you're 100% right about Afghans, but can we just also acknowledge they don't care about Americans either. They don't really care about those service members who died. Yes, I'm saying it. How many vets do we have living on the streets right now? How many? They don't care, they don't care. They use people and their lives as props to further whatever grifty agenda they have. That's all it is.
Rob wrote an outstanding job of explaining foreign policy to Americans, Cenk. Why, thank you, Rob. You're wonderful.
I'm just
together. Of course, you get 98% of the comments. I get 1, and now we're having a conversation.
No, it's unacceptable.
Okay, all right. What is acceptable and wonderful are new American heroes, Sugar Coma 101 and Lee Levin just joined by hitting the join button below on YouTube. Thank you guys, I really appreciate it. Tyler Hackner on YouTube said, America doesn't even care about its own kids, i.e. Sandy Hook, Parkland, etc. Unfortunately, that's also true. Derek Chido wrote in, you guys are amazing and special. Thank you for having empathy for people and having important talks about COVID and other topics. Derek, thank you. We all do this show together, guys. Whether you're using YouTube Super Chat or you're a member or you're giving bits on Twitch, it doesn't matter. We're all doing this together and we're gonna get correct information to people no matter what. Love you guys for being with us. We'll be back. Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Anna's got the news.
Texas's anti-abortion law is set to take effect on September 1st. Now, it is already being challenged in the courts, and there is some possibility that the courts will put a pause on the law going into effect, but we'll wait and see if that's likely to happen. It's already August 30th as we speak. So in just 2 days, this horrible, horrible law will take place. Now, what is the anti-abortion law? Well, it bans abortions after 6 weeks. And the majority of women who become pregnant don't know they're pregnant at 6 weeks. A lot of them don't know until a little later. And so this is effectively an abortion ban. But there are other provisions in this law that we should be incredibly concerned about because it pits Americans against one another and it offers a monetary reward for those who engage in this. Now, the anti-abortion law deputizes private citizens to actively seek out and sue people aiding or abetting women who are attempting to get abortions in the state of Texas. If you successfully sue that person, whether it's an abortion provider, a pregnant woman's friend, or even a rideshare driver who dropped her off at the clinic, you receive a $10,000 bounty. Now, you don't even have to be a resident in Texas. You could live anywhere in the country and engage in this disgusting behavior, trying to catch people who are getting alleged illegal abortions. And that's what makes this such a nefarious and awful law. Now, under the law, anyone anywhere in the US can bring a lawsuit, not just a Texas resident, which is a radical departure from the normal rules of litigation. And just to give you a few more details before I go to you, Cenk, beyond deputizing private citizens, the statute's main goal is to saddle clinics with lawsuits and legal fees. Additionally, if a private citizen successfully sues a clinic, that provider is responsible for paying for the winner's legal fees. It's simply a backdoor way to shut down clinics. So think about it. People could even bring forth frivolous or unfounded lawsuits, and the very nature of having to fight that lawsuit in court is so expensive that the abortion provider runs the risk of going bankrupt or losing the financial ability to even run that clinic in the first place. And that's very much the intention behind this law.
Yeah, this law is a disaster in a thousand different ways. First of all, it basically bans abortion. So if the courts allow it, okay, it's not going to be just Texas. Instantly, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and so many other states. In fact, the majority of our states, even though the country is 70% pro-choice, Republicans control a majority of the states. A lot of the states have smaller populations. The larger population states are blue states, except for Texas. And so most of the country will have banned abortion. So let's just be clear about that. And when you vote for a Republican, you vote to ban abortion, period. I don't know why anybody still kids themselves that they're not. They've passed it every time they've had an opportunity. The only thing that's protected folks is the courts, but that's breaking down, as you see here. Second nefarious part of that is that since they're allowing the vigilante justice or injustice in this case, and they're allowing people to sue the clinics into bankruptcy, it's their cute little loophole of saying, well, the state didn't do it. The state didn't ban abortion. We just allowed for civil lawsuits, and I guess people did the lawsuits. There's nothing we can do about that. Now, any real court that looked at that objectively and honestly would say, no, the state passed the law that allowed for that. It's obviously a state action. It's obviously intended to ban abortions, and this is unconstitutional. Are the conservative justices in that area and then in the Supreme Court going to be honest? At best, it's 50-50. So this thing could stand and abortion could be over. And then now let's finally talk about the vigilante portion of this. So now snitches get riches. So now they're all gonna go around like, oh, is anybody having an abortion? Now, how many false reports do you think there's gonna be? Tons and tons. Now we've turned everything into a witch hunt. What's the woman doing? Is she 6 weeks into her pregnancy? Well, who could tell? Nobody could tell it's 6 weeks. She can't even tell oftentimes it's 6 weeks. And so, and now everybody's looking, did she have sex recently? Has it been 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks? I want to get that $10,000. By the way, $10,000 is a lot of money. A lot of people are gonna want to get it. And so now they're gonna have everybody in the state and outside the state monitoring the sex lives of all of the women in the state to try to cash in on a witch hunt. This is insanity. We've reverted to totally barbaric state in places like Texas. And the Taliban would look at this rule and go, that's a pretty interesting rule. That's smart in Texas. Yeah. That way you can subjugate women while pretending not to, huh?
The good news is though, through the passage of this kind of law, we know that the lawmakers in the state of Texas really do care about human lives. Because that's what they cite for passing these types of restrictive reproductive laws. They really do value human lives. Oh wait, except they don't, which is abundantly clear in the way the state has handled coronavirus. It's one of the country's hotspots when it comes to coronavirus. I mean, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick could not wait in the very beginning of the pandemic to force people to get to work, even as coronavirus numbers were spiking, even as hundreds of thousands of Americans were likely to die and did die as a result of that kind of thinking. They don't actually care about human lives, and I think that it's really clear to people who are paying attention to that. It's just, It's a way of controlling women. For right-wing politicians, it's an attempt to gain brownie points among evangelical right-wing voters. And for others who are single-issue voters, sure, are there some Christians who genuinely think a zygote is the equivalent of a living, breathing human being? Sure, but I don't see them protesting or organizing to do anything about the feckless, awful behavior of local lawmakers who won't do the right thing in regard to COVID, okay? Seems like there's a lot more interest in controlling people's lives and particularly controlling women's bodies. And then you get to a fun twist to this story, because there is a fun twist, believe it or not. TikTokers have come to the rescue, at least to give us a little comedic relief when it comes to this awful story. So there are anti-choice groups who have set up websites. So if you want to possibly be a snitch and maybe win that bounty, you can put in your accusations or your claims, basically tips, if you suspect that someone is either conducting an abortion or getting an abortion. And so the Texas Right to Life recently launched a website that asks pro-life whistleblowers to anonymously submit tips on people they believe are seeking out abortions. And so TikTokers were like, oh, that's interesting. You got a website where we can submit things. How about some Shrek porn? Let's watch.
All right, y'all, we're gonna mess with Greg Abbott and all the other idiots that decided to outlaw abortion in Texas after 6 weeks. Thank you so much to my friend Olivia for coming up with this absolutely brilliant idea. So if you go to prolifewhistleblower.com, which I'm gonna put in the caption down below, you can see that Texas has anonymously set up a system where you can report people who have gotten abortions. Wouldn't it be so awful if we sent in a bunch of fake tips and crashed the site? Like, Greg Abbott's butt stinks. Spelt wrong, of course, because he deserves zero respect. How did you obtain this evidence? Smelt it from here in California. The doctor responsible, Dr. Stinkbutt. For the geographical information, just pick a random place in Texas, random city and zip code. And are you currently elected to public office? Yeah, sure. Let's go with that. Yay!
Found this website for like anonymously snitching on people who break the Texas Heartbeat Act, which is like some gay pro-life. And you can attach any file you want to it. So I just sent them a bunch of Shrek porn, and you can do it too. You go to that link.
So these right-wing zealots went into action as soon as they noticed that their little website was being flooded with things that they didn't ask for. So the site now blocks people from outside of the country, as well as people who are using VPNs to mask their locations, and people with a history of trying to spam the site by, say, submitting false reports. So certain IP addresses have been completely blocked from the website as a result of them going in and spamming the website with fun things like Shrek porn, which I didn't know existed, but it does. Of course it does.
Well, TikTok is the hope that 2021 didn't know it needed. And so I love the way that they mess with right-wingers, and I love the way that they're unapologetic. Because you have to remember, people who grow up on mainstream media, they see stuff like that and they would very heavily frown upon that. They would say, now this is some youngsters on TikTok doing this, but this is an outrage, messing with an official website. It's not an outrage at all. Go mess with them 1,000 times more.
100%.
Okay, they're asking you to spy in on women and their sex lives and try to get rich off of it by reporting them rightly or wrongly for potentially having an abortion, which is none of their goddamn business. So let me just be clear on two things. One is, Anna's right. I used to think that there were people who were genuinely pro-life. Now, I didn't agree with them. I don't think the zygotes are fully formed humans. Well, seems to be a fact. But anyway, I thought that was their genuine opinion. And I once saw a bumper sticker that was pro-life on the issue of abortion and was against war. And I was like, oh, okay, that's like a consistent pro-life position. I respect that. I might not agree with every part of it, but I respect it, right? But now you see, there are no pro-lifers. There's almost none. There's like 3 in the whole country. No, when it comes to COVID, they're like, kill them, kill them. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick that Anna referred to in Texas, he said, well, look, older people might have to die so we can open up businesses. You're pro-life? You voted for that guy, you're pro-life? And we can go on, drone strikes that kill civilians and children in the rest of the world, in Afghanistan, Yemen, etc. Kill them, kill them, kill them. Wars for Iraq, on. We can go on and on. You're not pro-life. So just stop lying to yourself, let alone us. So if you're not pro-life, you never meant it in the first place. So when people are actually alive, you don't give a goddamn about them, right? But when they're zygotes, all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, that's the one life I care about. Why? Oh, just a coincidence that I would have to take control of women's bodies to execute this. Well, golly gee, what an unintended consequence. Now women have to do what men say all the time, and they can't even control their own bodies. Imagine if you did that to men. Imagine the cries of freedom, freedom.
I think that, if we live in a country that considers itself fair, then there should be criminality attached to spank and salami. Sorry, no, I mean, because where does it end? If a zygote is considered life, why isn't sperm considered life? Are you spilling seed? Huh? You wanking off for pleasure? No, you got prosecution. There should be prosecution.
By the way, it's in the Bible. It's in the Bible.
Right to life. Right to life. Don't spill that seed, boy. We gotta come after them.
Yeah.
No, see how ridiculous that sounds? Because it is ridiculous.
If I've learned anything from Monty Python, it's that every sperm is sacred. And it's in the Bible, it's called onanism. And so men are guilty if they ever spill their seed without it going into a woman and impregnate her. Guilty. Guilty. We should take their freedom away and make sure that they cannot control their own bodies, and we should snitch on them. If you ever see a guy doing it, you get $10,000, right? Boy, you'd be so rich. The government couldn't possibly afford that. Now, it sounds absurd when you say it about men, but when you say it about women, not only that, forget like pleasuring yourself, which is a momentary act. No, you must carry that baby for 9 months, 10 months. You must take care of it for 18 years. You're an indentured servant of the state of Texas. Freedom, my ass. Texas doesn't believe in freedom. Conservatives don't believe in freedom. When it comes to women, they believe in subjugation and basically slavery. Go have our kids, or sometimes your rapist kids. That's how the sick right wing in this country treat women. And I don't care that the media coddles them. Oh, they're pro-life. They could be just as valid. Women, make sure you're having babies upon their command. By the way, they're for freedom. No, you're goddamn liars. You hate freedom. All you care about is power for yourself and subjugation of everyone else.
We have some updates on Hurricane Ida and how it's further complicated by COVID when we return from the break.
All right, guys, Anna and I are going to do a YouTube AMA, Ask Me Anything. That's going to be tomorrow. So go to the community tab, and if you're a tier 3 or tier 4 producer, you can ask us questions. You can submit the questions ahead of time. We're doing it for you guys, so please participate if you can. Marty Fulton just became a member by hitting the join button below. You could do that as well, and then you could pose us a question. I hate that picture of me. We're moving forward. All right, back to Twitch. Don't like it. All right, Tell Me What to Put gave 2,345 bits, and that's how we make this show possible. Thank you. And they do it all the time. Maddie Eric wrote in, now I'm subscribed on the app and on Twitch with Prime. Maddie, you're awesome. So thank you for doing that. Guys, even if you're subscribed somewhere else for us, it's still free for you if you have Amazon Prime. It still takes about 30 seconds. Go to tyt.com/prime and subscribe to us on Twitch and give us Jeff Bezos' money. We do get it, and it doesn't cost you a nickel. Pyromaniac just says, hey everyone, we appreciate they've been with us for 2 months. Sinus Oidel writes in, thank you TYT from lockdown Melbourne. Excited to finally get my first shot of Pfizer on Friday. Oh, good luck, go get it. And that's great news. Dequan Dewanki writes in, hey Anna and Cenk, what's good? How you doing with my 9 or 10 month streak? Hashtag TYT fam. We're doing all right, thanks to you. We appreciate it, and we appreciate your streak. Crazy Hawaiian and Dave Schmidt both gifted a sub. Now I'm going to Super Chat. Peter Hambry says, this Texas law also punishes rape/sexually assaulted children who are impregnated by a total stranger as young as even 10, and Texas says, it's off our hands. No, the blood is definitely on your hands. Peter, thank you for the point. Steph Liz writes in, doctor here, did an internship at an abortion clinic. We help more women with real life issues in those few weeks than Republicans have in decades. Steph, you're 1,000,000,000% right, and thank you for doing that internship. It makes a real difference in people's lives. Jeanette Villalona writes in, I don't understand how this ban is a good thing, because a lot of times it's the men who ask women to get it, but when women need it, it's criminal. Yeah, of course, you think they're gonna go arrest the guy who impregnated her or the guy who suggested that she get an abortion? No, they're not gonna do any of that. Do you think they're gonna fine him $10,000? No, they're not gonna do any of that, because the whole point of this law is to basically enslave women, and they're never gonna touch the men. Spin Me a Sailcloth writes in, here's what they're doing, driving out who's there, COVID kills who stays, pop out a bunch of new babies to brainwash. It's the fundamentalist way. It is, but honestly with COVID and the anti-vaccine stuff, they're killing themselves at an unbelievable rate. And it has political ramifications too. We'll explain in the next segment. Back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. You guys have a lot of strong opinions about Texas story as well, you should. I'm just gonna read one here. Official Covfefe card writes in, please, 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 I cannot wait for a Republican and their mistress getting busted at a clinic. I'm guessing it'll get swept under the rug. Well, you're guessing correctly, and don't bother waiting. It happens all the time, no one cares.
Are you kidding me? They'll fly their mistress out to a different state. Look, the privileged, the affluent in Texas, they've got nothing to worry about, okay? They can travel outside of the state if they need to. They'll get their abortion, everything's fine. Let's make no mistake about it. The working poor in this country, in Texas, they're the ones who are gonna suffer from this, hands down. Women of color, Latina women, black women, they're the ones who are gonna suffer as a result of this law. And by the way, once their children are born, does the state help them at all in terms of being able to care for them? No, of course not. Because once the baby is born, all of a sudden that person's life doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
Zygotes, important. Babies that are born, not that important.
Yeah, look up Representative DeJarle, he's from Tennessee. 3 abortions, a couple from his wife, I think, and one from his mistress or vice versa. And he said, yeah, I know, but we needed to do it. And no one cared, he's a Republican, they reelected him. They don't mean any of it. They just mean, I want to enslave you. Me, I could do whatever the hell I want. So if the Republicans get caught in Texas, it won't matter at all. Every Republican voter will be like, oh, attaboy. Well, you needed the abortion. What could you do? It was your mistress. Yep. Attaboy. Okay, let's go enslave the other women though. All right.
Well, let's talk about Hurricane Ida. Hurricane Ida has devastated parts of Louisiana and further compounded the ongoing coronavirus surge. Now, more than 1 million people in Louisiana and Mississippi, including all of New Orleans, were left without power as Ida, one of the most powerful hurricanes ever to hit the United States mainland, pushed through on Sunday and early Monday before weakening to a tropical storm. So far, the number of people who have died as a result of this hurricane is pretty low, but I just want to warn everyone that the death toll is likely to increase in coming days because there are still people who need to be rescued as a result of the flooding. People are stranded in their attics or on the roofs of their homes. So as of now, there have been a total of 2 fatalities. The hurricane twisted and collapsed a giant tower that carries key transmission lines over the Mississippi River to the New Orleans area, causing widespread outages. And Entergy, the local authorities said, and local authorities said. So the power company said that more than 2,000 miles of transmission lines were out of service, along with 216 substations. It almost appears as though maybe the energy companies and the utility companies should really reconsider the way their infrastructure is built, especially with these types of hurricanes and extreme weather conditions happening more and more often. Maybe it should be underground instead of above ground, and maybe we can prevent power outages from happening in the first place every time that there's a storm like this. Now, I also want to just quickly note that this is a disaster for another reason, and it's the fact that you have hospitals that have been completely overwhelmed with coronavirus patients who are unvaccinated and really could have prevented their hospitalizations in the first place. And so prior to the hurricane happening, there were some hospitals that were luckily evacuated, but many of them could not be evacuated because there's literally nowhere else to put these patients, right? So some of the hospitals that were in safer areas couldn't take in coronavirus patients. And I'll get to a statement by the governor on that issue in just a minute. But Cenk, do you want to weigh in on this?
Sure. Ida was tied for 5th strongest hurricane ever to hit the mainland at 150 miles per hour. So extreme weather events, it's almost like somebody warned us about it. And so look, hurricanes happen in hurricane season. So climate change didn't invent hurricanes, they always happen. But they're getting worse and worse and worse. That's why they're always breaking records. So this is the 5th strongest hurricane to ever hit America. And these days we've gotten so used to it, we just brush it off like, oh yeah, of course, hurricane devastates New Orleans, they have no power, they're in the middle of the summer, no air conditioning, no place to live. You see all the reports, roofs blown off of houses, people talking about they're never gonna live in Louisiana again. And we all go, oh, ho hum, as if climate change isn't here and it isn't devastating. But to be fair, the oil company executives still have millions to make.
Right, exactly. Now, let's talk about the hospital evacuations and how COVID has made this disaster even worse. So 4 Louisiana hospitals, according to the Associated Press, were damaged and 39 medical facilities were operating on generator power. Remember, there are power outages, so hospitals have to rely on the generator power in order to continue treating their patients. So officials said that they were evacuating scores of patients to other cities. Now, as the spokesperson for the governor's office notes, this is a COVID nightmare. We do anticipate that we could see some COVID spikes related to this, and Governor Edwards weighs in on the evacuation efforts in the next video. So let's take a quick look at that.
Your state's about 41% fully vaccinated from COVID-19. You have one of the highest hospitalization rates when it comes to the pandemic among states in the union. And most of the major hospitals weren't evacuating patients ahead of this storm. Are they gonna be all right?
Evacuating these large hospitals is just not an option because there's not any other hospitals with the capacity to take them. Now, we were able to evacuate over 20 nursing homes, some rehab facilities and behavioral health facilities and those sorts of things. But when you think in terms of hospitals, it's just not possible. So we know that they have been working extremely hard. They all have generators, they all have the fuel on hand and the extra food and the things that they're gonna need. But quite frankly, the wind, we expect, will cause power outages across much of Southeast Louisiana. It's impossible today to say how long the power will be out. And that begins to test your systems, whether it's the opportunity to deliver water to the hospitals. You can't run a ventilator without electricity. And I will tell you, our federal partners are leaning very far forward in terms of having additional generators en route and so forth. This is a major storm that's gonna test us in ways that we've not been tested before for a lot of reasons. But this COVID situation is certainly one of them.
So there were around 2,500 unvaccinated COVID patients that were hospitalized as of Saturday. So just before the hurricane hitting Louisiana. So again, it further complicates the situation because A, where do you evacuate the patients to? But also B, what about people who might need treatment or might need to go to the hospital as a result of injuries related to the hurricane. I mean, again, it just further compounds a bad situation. And it's something that could have been completely avoided. But of course, we have pandemic profiteers who like to spread disinformation and discourage people from getting vaccinated. It's disgusting.
So Louisiana is at a point where they have more COVID cases than they've ever had throughout the entire pandemic. Now that's crazy because so many people are vaccinated now, so they are not getting hospitalized. It just means among the unvaccinated, it's spreading so much that they're at a record rate, even though a big percentage are already vaccinated. So why? Because the unvaccinated are like, we don't need no stinking medicine. Let's smear COVID all over ourselves and see how it turns out. Well, it's turned out very poorly. And if you were in the hospital and then an extreme weather event hits you, well, then now you're in for a world of hurt. All that could have been avoided with a vaccination, but hey, on the other hand, you're owning the libs, so good luck with that. Now, by the way, the government does work for sometimes. The one piece of good news here is the levees held. So they were rebuilt after Hurricane Katrina and they were built better. It doesn't mean they're gonna continue to hold, but they held this time and they did a good job of protecting people. So look, an investment in infrastructure saved lives and maybe saved the city. Hey, sometimes us working together can actually help. I talk slowly for right wingers.
Right, I know, Cenk, but like, okay, on one hand, you have the potential to save human lives. On the other hand, you have wealthy people who need an additional yacht. So do we really want tax cuts that would maybe prevent them or make it a little bit harder for them to buy their 11th yacht? Just so we can save human lives? Do we really want that? I mean, we live in America. It's all about individualism.
Yeah, Anna, that's a good point about the 11th yacht. And that yacht is called #freedom, while you all suffer for it, pretending that it's somehow related to you. It ain't got nothing to do with you, man. The whole point of that freedom talking point is to deregulate so the companies don't bury their landlines and cause 10 times the problem. That's one of 1,000 examples. And so they get tax cuts for the rich. And then as you get COVID, they laugh and laugh and laugh at you. You know who got vaccinated first? The rich. If it didn't work, the rich wouldn't have done it. In fact, the Republican donors ask their different Republican governors, you better get me that vaccine right away. Meanwhile, they tell you idiots, oh, you don't get vaccinated. It'll work out great for you. By the way, give me more tax cuts. That's what's happening right now in the Republican Party.
All right, that does it for our first hour, but stick around for the second hour because we will finally help you understand why an unproven treatment for COVID-19, ivermectin, is being pushed by certain people. Yes, there's a profit motive. We'll uncover that profit motive for you and more. It's one of my favorite stories of the day because it's just so important and really not talked about enough. So come right back. We'll give you that story and more.
Every day, the Young Turks delivers 2 hours of solid, fact-based, timely news and progressive commentary on all the day's most important stories. We keep our viewers informed while also providing perspective and insight on the news we cover so you understand not only what's happening, but also what's happening behind the scenes, the stories behind the stories. Gee, I wonder why we didn't get $15 minimum wage. Because they're all raising money from the guys who don't want to increase the minimum wage.
And we play musical chairs and put these children in one awful detention facility to the next. That's what's happening at the border.
The things that got him banned, he's still spreading. So presumably, I think it's reasonable to say that if you allow him back on the website, he's going to do it again.
Any legal voter that we deem not willing to vote for my side shouldn't vote because it'll replace me that's supposed to vote for my side. That's not how voting works. That's not how democracy works.
And while many people following today's political news can get discouraged about the direction of the nation and the world, that's not us. At TYT, we're genuinely optimistic about the future, and with good reason. Today, wide majorities of Americans agree with our progressive stances on issues ranging from healthcare and education to climate, immigration, and wages. The rising generation of young people are also overwhelmingly progressive in their political beliefs and policy objectives, and they're increasingly flexing their muscle as voters and activists to demand change change from our elected officials. The traditional mainstream media is mostly AWOL. They, along with the government and many other cherished institutions, have been captured by corporate interests. Audiences sense that they're not getting the whole story or even the truth from once trusted outlets, whether broadcast and cable TV news networks or national newspapers and magazines. The Republicans say we will serve our corporate masters at all costs, including killing democracy, yet here we are. Where else do you hear that? You hear that on NBC, on ABC, on CBS? You hear it nowhere.
They don't want to talk about money in politics because it's really hard to pass judgment when your media organization is funded by fossil fuel companies.
The antidote is the Young Turks. Unlike mainstream corporate outlets, we're not beholden to corporate advertisers, the defense contractors, to Wall Street, or to Big Pharma. And we don't carry water for the Republican or Democratic parties. So watch us Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, and join the thousands of progressives around the globe who tune in every day for TYT's unmatched, award-winning content and see what it's like to experience a news organization that only answers to you.
I'll continue to sit. I'm going to continue to stand with the people that are being oppressed.
The president labeled him a son of a bitch.
I don't think it's good to be a distraction to your team.
To stand proudly for the national anthem.
You know, some of these people need to move to another country.
Well, you shouldn't be playing, you shouldn't be there. Maybe you shouldn't be in the country.
The president is put in place to amplify the racists in this country.
Black men and boys are killed at an exponentially higher rate than white men and boys, as outlined by PBS. Black people are most likely to be killed by police, found mappingpoliceviolence.org. Personally, my biggest gripe is not seeing how sports and politics have been attached at the hip. From the jockey syndrome, to the Negro Leagues, to Tommy Smith and John Carlos, Muhammad Ali, to modern day and everything in between. This is not an escape. It is a reflection of reality and a reflection of the times.
Everything that we've accomplished over the years is because of our members who've allowed us to remain independent of corporate interests and reach 20 million followers. Now is the time to bring as many people into the progressive movement as possible. We're inviting you to be the change and help bring a community-powered progressive change machine to life. Details are at tyt.com/change. If you're a member, thank you. We need you to remain so. If you're one of the thousands of viewers out there who's not a member yet, the time has come for you to join now. We need you more than ever. tyt.com/change. Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. All right, more devastating news. Let's do this.
Well, sheriffs across the country are panicking over vaccine mandates that do not exist. Now, I'm a proponent of vaccine mandates, but these individuals are not because they believe in all sorts of conspiratorial garbage. But the story actually gets even worse than that. Here's Sheriff Mark Lamb of the Pinal County Sheriff's Department. This is in Arizona. Here's what he has to say about proposed vaccine mandates.
Hey folks, Pinal County Sheriff Mark Lamb here. With the increase in private businesses and even government organizations talking about mandating the vaccine, I wanted to let you know that here at the Pinal County Sheriff's Office, we do not mandate the vaccine. And as long as I'm your sheriff, we will never mandate the vaccine. We believe that your health choices are yours and yours alone. So whether you get the vaccine or don't get the vaccine, that's your private information. Here, we believe in America and freedom, and we're going to continue on with that. God bless.
Health choices should be yours and yours alone when it does not have to do with a contagious virus that has killed more than 600,000 Americans in a short period of time. Obviously, the point of getting vaccinated is to keep Americans safe, to prevent them from having to be hospitalized or from dying as a result of the coronavirus. But it also significantly lowers a vaccinated person's chances of contracting the virus in the first place, which means that it lowers the chance chances of a vaccinated person from spreading the virus to others. But apparently this sheriff is completely unaware of the fact that we already have vaccine mandates that are implemented in public school systems across the country. But nonetheless, yes, it's not Pinal, is it Pinal?
I don't know. I
anyway,
don't care.
So I wanted to make that correction. But I also want to note that right now, no such vaccine mandate in that area exists. That this is reported by Vice News. They say, on the contrary, Arizona's governor recently signed an order blocking local governments from adopting vaccine mandates. Now, this is a growing problem, because it's not just about coronavirus, it's about these rebel sheriffs who literally say that they will not enforce laws that they disagree with. Lamb is a prominent figure in the constitutional sheriffs movement, a quietly growing network of renegade law officers who believe God enshrined them with the highest constitutional authority in the US, and that they have a special right to ignore any laws they personally believe are unconstitutional.
Fire them all. Fire them instantly.
And it gets worse. I'll give you more details about this group in just a minute. But Cenk, you're chomping at the bit. Go ahead.
Yeah. What do you mean you're not going to enforce the law? That's literally your job. It reminds me of the Muslim cash register guy. I think it was a case in Minnesota a long time ago. And he's like, I don't want to ring up the bacon because it's against my religion. Well, then get another job, because your job involves ringing up bacon, ham, etc. Right? The lady in Kentucky who didn't want to give out marriage license to gay couples. Well, your job is to give out marriage licenses. Now it's legal. You have to give out marriage licenses. Well, I don't want to do that job. Great, then you're fired. Why is this hard? It's not at all hard. It's like a doctor saying, well, I refuse to do surgery. Well, you're a surgeon. I know, I refuse to do it. Great, you're fired. This is not hard. So these bunch of jackass sheriffs, renegade makes them sound cool. No, they're losers, they're mental patients. They think God is talking to them specifically and tells them not to do their job. And the God says to them, you have special constitutional privileges. You are white and a right winger. You have special privileges, God said. Did he? Did he? I think you belong in a mental asylum. They carry badges and guns. And of course, you're gonna be shocked to find out that same guy that we showed you started warning about if any Black Lives Matter activists come around these parts, they're gonna have trouble. So, okay, great, you're targeting blacks. You think he's not targeting Latinos down in Arizona? Okay, but why? Because God whispered in his ear, oh, you get to hate other people. Oh, you're so special. I picked you to be a sheriff. Ignore the laws. No, fire everyone in that organization instantly. They're telling you they're not going to do their job. It's not at all hard. Fire them all. You want to call it cancel culture and cry about it? I don't care. Do your goddamn job. Otherwise, we're not going to pay you. It's our money. It's taxpayer money. And if you're not going to do it, or you're gonna do it poorly and you say, oh, I'm gonna target brown people and black people, and I'm gonna say God whispered it in my ear. Shut up and go get another job.
No, I mean, the lawlessness that is supported by sheriff's departments and local police officials is pretty incredible. I mean, look, this is unrelated to the coronavirus mandate story. It's also unrelated to the group that we're talking about here. But this is not something that's just indicative of right-wing parts of the country. Look at what's happening with the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department and the fact that for a very long time now, I mean, we've known this since the 90s, there are literal street gang members within their ranks. And it's just like this open secret that no one does anything about. So Google Los Angeles Sheriff's Department gangs. You'll see the information about it, and it just shows you the amount of lawlessness that takes place within sheriff's departments and local police departments. Now back to the constitutional sheriffs, because who are they? Where did this come from? And what do they genuinely believe? Does this go further than COVID-related matters? And unfortunately, the answer is yes. The Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association was founded by a former Arizona sheriff, Richard Mack, in 2011, intended as a sheriff-centric spinoff of, oh, look at that, another gang, Oath Keepers Militia. Now, militia, I think, makes these groups sound like they're cool when they're really not. These are just right-wing gangs that somehow get treated differently here in the US. Mack incorporated many of the ideas from the anti-government militia, Posse Comitatus, and sovereign citizen movements that he'd forged alliances with over the years and formalized them through the Constitutional Sheriffs Movement. So this is how this group began. And their influence is pretty terrifying. So the influence of Constitutional Sheriffs Movement has been especially evident over the last year as dozens of sheriffs nationwide, many of whom are self-identified adherents of the movement, defied lockdown orders, participated in reopen rallies, refused to enforce temporary bans on guns at polling places. This is of course during the 2020 general election, and pushed 2020 election conspiracies.
Yeah.
Why are they not fired?
So the Sovereign Citizens Movement has two problems. Number one, it kills cops. So here's cops going, oh, you kill other cops? Well, were they liberals or something? Who cares? Come on, man. Let's all form an alliance here, and I'll get a bunch of sheriffs to join your side. Second problem is Sovereign Citizens Movement is about being sovereign and not following the laws of the country, the state, the locality that you're in. Well, the job of the sheriff is to enforce the laws of the local area, the state, and they're not doing it. They're saying we're actively over here, us. We're not doing our job, ha 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 ha. And you give us a position to enforce the laws. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to enforce whatever the hell I want because I have right-wing privilege. And the problem, guys, is that the left wing, the moderates, the media, the government, otherwise in this country is so pathetically weak, and they enable these insane right-wingers to run roughshod over our laws and create anarchy and chaos and say, I don't want to enforce your stinking laws. I want power. I hate democracy. I hate freedom. If it's your freedom, I hate it. If it's my freedom to oppress you, I'm gonna get a badge and a gun, and I'm gonna ignore anything that you tell me to do, and I'm gonna be totally lawless vigilantes. And we tolerate it.
Yep.
That's insane that we tolerate it. That's why I say everybody that's on that list should instantly be fired. They are announcing to you that they're not gonna do their jobs. Back to Lamb, okay? So, sorry, Anna, on Lamb, he said on top of that, when he wanted to attack the Black Lives Matter protesters, he said he wanted to form a civilian posse as well. You're the sheriff, what the hell do you need a civilian posse for? That's saying, I suck at my job, I refuse to do my job, and I'd like others to do my job for me.
That's awesome that the taxpayers in that community are funding that guy's salary as he just openly and transparently says that he will not enforce laws that he disagrees with and that he's gonna engage with right-wing gang members. In fact, he's part of this right-wing gang. I mean, it just blows my mind. It's totally fine, totally fine. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of, Glenn Greenwald is adjacent former left-wingers, I don't know what they are now, scaremongering about crime in the country, which to be fair, crime has gone up. But they're talking about lawlessness when it comes to poor people. They don't ever talk about lawlessness when it comes to people in power. And this is what we're talking about, right? This is lawlessness among people in positions of power that just goes unnoticed, or if it is noticed, they don't face any ramifications or consequences for it. I'll give you another example. And again, this is all brazen, it's all out in the open, it's overt, it's not like they're secretly conspiring in any way. Earlier this summer, Sheriff Bob Songer of the Klickitat County, Washington Department, who has close ties to the Constitutional Sheriffs Movement, threatened to arrest any state officials who try to enforce COVID-19 restrictions in his jurisdiction.
The state troopers should have gone in with very heavily armed, and I would hate for there to be an actual armed conflict. But these guys are super dangerous, and parts of this movement, as I've said before, has killed law enforcement. They should go in very prepared and make sure that they arrest that man threatening to kill other people and not follow the law. Your job is to follow the law and enforce the law. You say you won't do it. This is so obvious. All right, one more thing about Lamb. He's doing this thing, he's calling himself the American sheriff because it's all about marketing, it's all about money-making, scams, on top of the lunacy, right? On top of the law breaking. So he's charging $4.99 a month to subscribe to the American Sheriff Network, and then they show them presumably kicking ass, God knows what illegal things that they're doing on that network, okay? I don't know, it's a literal question. I don't know where the $4.99 is going to. If it's going to his pocket, Who authorized, even if it's going to the sheriff's department in general, who authorized you to start a company, a little racket on the side, using taxpayer money? You're supposed to be actually doing law enforcement. You know, people that are getting mugged, robbed, raped, whatever in your county. You don't give a damn about that. You're like, how am I gonna make money? I'm not gonna enforce law. Well, God whispered in my ear, I should make all the money. Give me the money, give me the money. And you're gonna take taxpayer money and you're gonna set up this goddamn racket? Because you know what, the thing that conservative leaders have realized is that their followers will believe anything. And they'll let them break the law, and they'll give them money to break the law. So they're taking advantage of people who they think are schmucks.
Let's take our break. When we come back, the story you do not want to miss. What are the financial incentives behind pushing unproven and dangerous coronavirus treatments like ivermectin? Well, we've got some details on that and more when we come back.
Back during the social break here on Twitch. Gorilla Pimp says, shout me out, Cenk. Mission accomplished. Ohana Dragon says, 6 months of Bezos bucks. Thank you, TYT, for bringing truth to the news. Special thank you to Anna for being such a strong woman. As a woman myself, I look up to you and know how hard it can be in a male-dominated field. You're amazing and keep being you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Ohana Dragon, I double down on that. So thank you for that comment, and you're absolutely right. Now let's go to Super Chat. Phantoms Forever says, this embarrasses me as an Arizonian or an Arizonan. And well, you should be, and your sheriffs have been notoriously the worst sheriffs in America that discriminate on purpose and never do their jobs. So as a citizen, you should try to take control of that through the normal political process. Jason R says, cool goose, meet gander. Progressives should bring forth laws that allow gun victims to sue the gun store where the gun was bought. Well, we tried that, and then right-wingers banned it, and Democrats folded. Welcome to America. We have no one on our side that ever fights other than Cori Bush and a couple of just Democrats. And their side is got an army of lunatics that fight at every turn on things that make no sense. Rocket Raccoon says, we spent over 2.26 trillion in Afghanistan. Imagine if we spent it here. The country could have enough infrastructure that could be useful, especially during calamities like Hurricane Ida. Sad. Indisputably true. But the media was like, yeah, war, 20 years in Afghanistan. Don't question it, don't question it. We're leaving, oh, God damn it, question it, right? Detroit Microson says, never stop being the same great TYT. And a heart emoji. Well, we appreciate it. Heart emoji right back at you. And OK Pyre says, Gen Z has my full support. Sincerely, Gen X. I know, right? Each generation, unfortunately, faces more and more difficult situations. New American heroes, Ida Larson, they all hit the join button below. You could do this too, and you could upgrade, and I read the upgrades as well. Ida Larson, Derek Chido, Trevor Watson, Christopher Hyde, Olivia's Cruelty-Free Beauty, Joanne Robbins, and Lena Bear. So thank you guys, you make Young Turks possible, and if you're layer 3 or 4, or I'm sorry, tier 3 or 4 on YouTube, you can participate and ask me anything that Anna and I are doing tomorrow. Trigger Incarnate writes in on our member section, civilian posse's code for lynch mob. Unfortunately, it has been for a long time. Die Hard says we should compare mass mandates to drunk driving laws. Ask this sheriff if he's against drunk driving laws as well. I'm afraid of the answer. We'll be back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Casper's got more news.
All right. Do you ever wonder where the calls to use ivermectin, a livestock dewormer, came from? Especially as a treatment for coronavirus, which of course has not been proven to be an effective treatment for coronavirus. Well, it turns out that there are some profit motives behind pushing this drug, and stick around because I'm gonna give you the details on how it all works in just a minute. But what prompted me to really investigate this was a story involving a judge in Ohio who has ordered a hospital to administer ivermectin to one of its COVID-19 patients, despite the fact that the FDA has noted on multiple occasions that it is not an effective treatment or a preventative measure for coronavirus, and the vaccine has gotten full approval by the FDA, the Pfizer vaccine. Now, and by the way, you can get the vaccine for free. Now, Judge Gregory Howard wrote that doctors treating 51-year-old Jeffrey Smith shall immediately administer ivermectin to Smith, according to court documents. Smith will receive 30 milligrams of the drug for 3 weeks. Now, why would a judge make this decision, especially since ivermectin is not an effective treatment for COVID? Well, it turns out that Jeffrey Smith was prescribed this drug by a specific doctor. Okay, but the hospital that he is currently receiving treatment at, he's hospitalized with COVID-19, refused to administer it because they were being responsible in noting that it is not an effective treatment for COVID. Jeffrey Smith came down with COVID-19 in early July and has been in the ICU of the Butler County Hospital for weeks. His wife, Julie Smith, asked in Butler County Commons Pleas Court on August 20th for an emergency order for the use of ivermectin. Julie Smith explored ivermectin as an option for her husband's treatment on her own and connected with Dr., and this is important, with Dr. Fred Wagschel. Now, he prescribed the drug and the hospital refused to administer it. Now look, at first I thought the judge was the bad guy, but the judge was like, well, a doctor prescribed it to him, so the hospital must administer it as a result of that prescription. It is not the judge's job to determine whether or not it's an effective treatment for the patient. Now, the doctor, though, is the questionable one for making the decision to prescribe something that he very likely knows is not an effective treatment for COVID-19. Now, who is Dr. Fred Wagschel? Well, he is a Dayton, Ohio area pulmonary doctor who's listed as the founder of the Frontline COVID-19 Critical Care Alliance, a alleged nonprofit that touts ivermectin as both a preventative and treatment for COVID-19. The organization's How to Get Ivermectin section on its websites includes prices and locations of pharmacies that will supply it. Now, I'm gonna get into the grift component of this drug in just a minute, but Cenk, I wanted to give you a chance to jump in.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's not the judge's fault. He's got to let him have that medicine. The part that breaks my heart is they keep waiting for this medicine as if it's going to save them, when it's just snake oil. And ivermectin in small doses aren't necessarily going to hurt you. Obviously, talk to your local doctor. But in large doses can cause nausea, vomiting, seizures, heart problems, and could kill you. And as we told you before, 70% of the calls to the poison center in Mississippi are because people took too much ivermectin. By the way, why are they taking too much of it? Because they're taking the amount that is prescribed, not prescribed, but put forward for horses and cattle. I don't know if you know this, they're slightly larger than us. So when you take those doses, well, then you're creating a significant health problem for yourself. But worse than that is waiting around for it to cure you, even if you took a lower dose. Because it ain't gonna cure you. As Anna's about to tell you, it's a giant scam. It's a money-making scam. And and all these people put their hope into it, and so that she's going to the judge and be like, please, you gotta let, my husband's sick, you gotta let him take ivermectin. No, listen to the doctors, listen to the doctors.
So look, since he's hospitalized, they are treating him. And by the way, it's unclear whether or not he's vaccinated, so we can't say for sure. But the likelihood is that he is unvaccinated because the vast majority of hospitalized coronavirus patients right now happen to be unvaccinated. However, since he's hospitalized, they are giving him steroids, Regeneron. I mean, they're giving him everything that a COVID patient would get. But you're right in noting that ivermectin is not gonna save him. It's just good news that he's getting actual effective treatment. But who knows if he's gonna survive, right? Because some people, even with all of that treatment, even as they're on a ventilator and they're hospitalized, a lot of people don't make it. So that's why this story is so depressing. But now let's get to the snake oil component to it. Where did ivermectin and calls to use it as a COVID-19 treatment come from? And once you get into the details, you get a sense of the profit motive behind it. Now, it is a drug that was manufactured by Merck, which is a major pharmaceutical company. You can get generic versions of the drug, but the way that doctors and certain organizations are making money off of telemedicine and by prescribing this drug for its off-label use is where the grift comes in. So this all came about in December of 2020, and it was pushed by a group known as America's Frontline Doctors, okay? The person who founded America's Frontline Doctors is this emergency room doctor out of Los Angeles by the name of Simone Gold. She was actually arrested on January 6th for her role and participation in the Capitol riots. Now, what they do is they charge people for these consultations through telemedicine. And obviously they make money off of those consultations, and they have doctors who are willing to prescribe ivermectin for its off-label and unproven use as a coronavirus treatment. So they charge an arm and a leg in certain cases in order for people to be able to obtain these prescriptions. They're able to do this through telemedicine services, which were loosened in terms of the restrictions on telemedicine during the pandemic, because obviously people might want to see a doctor without going into a hospital or going into the doctor's office. And so since those restrictions were loosened, here come the people with their grift, taking advantage of the system. And this group, America's Frontline Doctors, not only do they charge for the consultation, they also will expect the person who gets the prescription to charge or to pay extra in order to obtain the drug, right? And then what they do is these like so-called RV tours. They'll go around the country saying they're doing these RV tours, and they'll charge people $1,000 to do meet and greets with these doctors who are pushing the drug. And the Federal Trade Commission right now has sent out 400 letters to groups and individuals who are doing similar things because they're pushing for drugs that are actually harming people, and at the same time they're making money by doing it. Now on social media, the America's Frontline Doctors is one of the top organizations steering customers to the deworming medication as a coronavirus treatment. On its website, people looking for COVID-19 medicine are told to click on a button labeled "Contact a Physician" and pay $90 for the consultation. The link takes customers to another website, Speak with an MD, where they're asked to submit payment information and told that one of the frontline doctors will call them within a few days, with sick patients being prioritized. The group describes Speak with an MD as a telemedicine service with hundreds of AFLDS trained physicians. And by the way, after they get the prescription, some of the customers are charged anywhere between $70 to $700 for ivermectin, which again is not a proven treatment or a proven preventative method in response to coronavirus. I mean, it's just absolutely disgusting. So this doctor that we're talking about who prescribed the drug to the man in Ohio, he's, as far as I know, not part of this particular group of grifters. He just decided to start his own group, frontline, COVID-19 doctors, and he should be investigated because he's a doctor. You know, he knows what he's doing, which means that it's abundantly clear that he's prescribing a drug that's ineffective. And by the way, you know what they do? Some of the people who call into America's Frontline Doctors are met with doctors who are like, listen, get vaccinated, but I'll also prescribe ivermectin, right? And I think that's a way of them trying to cover their own asses, much to the chagrin of the patients who have been, convinced that the vaccines are dangerous and awful, right?
I don't think that's it, actually.
Okay, hold on, one more thing though. This doctor that we're talking about, if you go to his website, what he advocates for is an ivermectin/mask plus method. So he's telling them to wear the masks, right? Which is the effective method. But he's also prescribing ivermectin, which is ineffective. And that helps to, I think it helps to cover their asses. Like, why do you think it doesn't help to cover their asses?
No, for the last doctor that you mentioned, that sounds like that might be what he's doing. No, for the frontline guys, they don't have dozens of physicians. There's only a couple of people. The overwhelming majority of doctors tell you to do the right things. What they did is they outsourced to another company that isn't wackadoodle. They're just a normal telemedicine company. So a lot of times these guys are getting normal doctors that are doing telemedicine and they're telling them, oh, take the vaccine. And then the customers are outraged. They're like, wait a minute, I thought the vaccine was bad. That's why I'm here for ivermectin. And he's like, look, dude, I'm doing telemedicine. If you want ivermectin, I'll give it to you, right? But you should also do the thing. That's why because there isn't a whole lot of doctors who think, oh, only take ivermectin. So that's why they had to outsource, and it's cheaper. So that's why. Anyway, but look, guys, the origin of the story is also super interesting. It turns out all of this started when right-wing groups wanted to support Trump when he was talking about hydroxychloroquine. And so they're the ones that put together that famous press conference. You remember with the doctors and the demon sperm lady?
Yep,
right?
Same group.
And so then they took some of those doctors and they started having them tour across the country to and in their lab coats, to make it seem like Trump knows what he's talking about. Here are these esteemed demon sperm doctors, and they're saying that Trump is right, and that they're covering up the real medicine, right? And so it all started as an ass-kissing operation of Trump. But then some of those doctors, of course, being the dirtbags that they are and not actually practicing real medicine, were like, oh, wait a minute, on top of supporting Trump, I can also make money doing this.
Exactly.
So when you talk about Simone Gold, for example, I mean, in a sense, she's a frontline doctor, frontline in the rebellion, right? In the wrong way, the riots on January 6th. So but she wasn't there as a doctor; she was just there as a rioter.
By the way, real quick, their first strategy wasn't to encourage people to take hydroxychloroquine. Their first strategy in support of Donald Trump, and by the way, this group is funded by right-wingers, of course, including Tea Party groups. Their first strategy was to prematurely open the country back up, which is what Trump was calling for. So this was their way of supporting Trump. And then it morphed into pushing for hydroxychloroquine, and then later it morphed into pushing for ivermectin, which clearly there's a profit motive behind them doing this. So there's a profit motive when it comes to these media conspiracy theorists who are like, ooh, I'm gonna tell you what the hot new treatment is, even though it's gonna harm you. And that helps appeal to the conspiracy theorist audience, and it helps to drive up their ratings. And then there's a grift going on with these organizations and these groups who are charging consultation fees to individuals who have been convinced that the vaccine, which is free and has wide, approval by the FDA, is bad, but somehow this unproven, livestock medication that has no impact on your respiratory system, but does have an impact on your intestinal tract, is somehow better. Like, that's what they should do.
So it starts as a way of saying, yeah, open up the businesses, and Trump is right. And then once they get into the hydroxy business, they go, oh, wait a minute, I can make money from hydroxy because I'm a so-called doctor. So I'll just start prescribing that and I'll make some good money. And then, oh my God, Simone Gold's famous now because she was on January 6th. And right-wingers love people who hate America and want to destroy our democracy. So then they start doing the RV tour. They start charging $1,000 because these doctors are celebrities now.
Yep.
To see them.
They encourage people to do monthly donations.
Yeah.
Monthly recurring donations.
For what? For non-medical advice. It doesn't. A normal doctor doesn't charge you a monthly fee to give you advice as a doctor because he's a doctor, right? He charges you a fee when you show up and you get you have an appointment. Anyway, so then they realize, oh my God, this is awesome. We can lie to Americans and make money doing it. So when ivermectin pops up on the scene, they're like, this is gold. And there's overwhelming demand because right-wing media is going crazy, and some people still pretending to be left-wing media. They're slanging that horse paste. So they're like, great, we'll charge you $90 for a consultation. The guys that we outsource it to charge $60. We'll keep the $30 on top. But for a lot of you, we won't even do it. That's why there's tons of them that are going, my husband is sick. And that's what really makes me so sad. Because you can tell in the stories of the patients, they really are getting suckered. They really believe it. And they take advantage of the most vulnerable people. They know right-wingers are target-rich environment for guys who aren't that bright, okay? That's a perfect target for them. And then there's the elderly.
It's not even about being bright or not, Cenk. It's about how institutions have failed people to the point where there's widespread distrust. I don't think that it's just about right-wingers. I think that this has impacted people of all political affiliations. But yes, it's definitely dominated in the right wing. I don't think it's just because, oh, people are dumb. I think it's because people don't trust our institutions. And these groups, right, are exploiting that. They're exploiting that for profit.
The grifters target people who are susceptible to mythology, that can't figure things out on their own, paranoia, whatever you want to say. They go to the low-hanging fruit. Who are the people who are easiest to trick? And in this country, that has become de facto at least 80% right-wingers. Are there some cuckoo left-wingers who don't believe in vaccines and want to try horse paste instead? Apparently there are, right? But it's largely the right wing. They're the easiest scam in the world. And look, don't be a right winger, get educated. But beyond that, yes, I feel bad for them. I feel bad for the actual patients that are waiting with dying family members for goddamn horse paste. So they charge the $90 in the beginning. Sometimes they just flat out keep it and go, who cares? We're not gonna give it to you, you dummy. Well, what did you think this was? So then they say, okay, now give me the $70 to $700. Ivermectin is actually relatively cheap. It doesn't cost $700. They're just robbing people blind. And then on top of that, a lot of the time, they don't send the ivermectin. So there's all these people that are out there going, where is it? I trusted them, I believed in them. My wife is dying, my father is dying, and they're waiting for something that is never going to come because they're robbing you. The point is the robbery. And so this is what America has devolved into. And there's lawlessness. Nobody ever does anything about it.
Totally.
Do we have any law enforcement at all? I mean, this is classic fraud.
Look, the FTC, to be fair, sent 400 strongly worded letters. So we've got that.
Look, they should do real investigations, and whether it's the people that we mentioned in this story or not, they're innocent until proven guilty. But there should be investigations of very credible charges here. And if they are guilty, they should get massive jail sentences, massive. They robbed people that they knew were dying.
Yep. They don't care.
And they knew that if they robbed them and gave them false hope, there would be a greater chance that they would die. And they did it anyway. So find out who actually did it. There should be, we're trying to piece together who might have done it, who might not have done it. But there should be actual law enforcement, and they should bring these people to court. And if they didn't do it, then great, let them go. But if they did do it, my God, put them away, maybe for life.
And I want to just give credit to the wonderful reporting by Vera Bergengruen over at Time, because she's the one who found the details about what's happening with this ivermectin grift. And I imagine that the same model is being replicated with other groups of people who just see an opportunity to charge all sorts of fees to desperate people who are looking for some sort of magic potion or cure for COVID.
So,
just get vaccinated, please.
Last thing here, we'll put the link to that great article down below if you're watching this video later on YouTube or Facebook. Check out the description box. We often have those links, and it's a great piece and you should read it. And finally, look guys, I'm worried. They're gonna get these guys to turn on the doctors. and they're gonna say, oh, the ivermectin would have saved you if it wasn't for the goddamn doctor, the actual doctors. And so wait for that next phase of right-wing insanity.
All right, we'll be right back.
Back on TYT here. First of all, remember tyt.com/change. We're trying to find a way, like you know how the TikTok guys are saying, hey, go to this website, send them Shrek porn, etc. Now, we're not gonna do the Shrek porn, but we're trying to find a way to institutionalize that here at TYT so that we could show you how to fight for change together. So that's part of the reason for membership. But I also want you to know, we lose money at a $1.99 membership on our website, but you guys can help subsidize it. So if people sign up at the higher levels, like $25 and higher, we open up more $1.99 membership for folks who can't afford it. So check that out at tyt.com/change. I want to go to, yes, thank you. And I got Old School tonight. Big Rick Energy's on right after the bonus episode. That's at 8:30 p.m. Eastern on twitch.tv/TYT. But Old School's on at 7 o'clock tonight. So guys, going forward, that live episode, the first one, is available to everyone. The second episode, was for members, but we're gonna put all of it behind the member paywall, honestly, because members love Old School, and you guys make the show possible. So we're gonna go in that direction. But the first episode is always live. Check it out tonight at 10 o'clock Eastern. All right. JMG on Twitch says, love you guys. I'm a member for a few years, kind of new to Twitch. Well, I love that you were checking that out, and thank you for being a member all that time. Bonsai Tree Dragon says 5 months of #Bezos bucks. Kristen CDN writes in, TYT is right. It did take 30 seconds to sub, and it's free. You're awesome for pointing that out. tyt.com/prime to do that. And Mr. D-Man 3000 says, take my Bezos bucks, glad to be subbed. Lord Kane just resubbed for 12 months. BC Trumpet gifted 5 subs. And now I'm going to super chat. First of all, Faith Darlene just joined on YouTube by hitting the join button below. Thank you, Faith. Great to have you here. Kelly K said, happy 1-year TYT membership anniversary and birthday to me. Well, Kelly, happy birthday to you and happy anniversary. Now, Andrew wrote in with an interesting point. Hospital physicians have the capacity to discontinue medications prescribed as an outpatient. We do it all the time, and they're only required to take prior to admission medication into consideration. Now, Andrew, I hear you, and I'm sure that you're right. It's hard for that judge to make that call in the story that we did about it, and he might have gotten the law wrong too, based on what you're saying. I'm not sure, but the real heart of the problem is the fake doctors or the doctors that still have their licenses, which is ridiculous, prescribing the wrong things for money. But I love that you're trying to do the right thing. Tyrannosaurus in F14 wrote in, the reason desperate cures like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and CIO2, which I didn't even know, get pushed is because doctors in poor countries can't buy vaccines. This is all they have to treat people despite poor evidence. And back on TYT, Jenkins with you. Let's do it.
A Republican All right, I don't know if that's the B-roll we want to use. We're doing F block, guys. So anyway. A Republican political hopeful from Pennsylvania who's a huge Trump supporter and does not believe that Biden won the 2020 election has now stated that he plans on using violence and intimidation against school board officials who implement mask mandates. Now, this person is Steve Lynch. He's a personal trainer and anti-maxer who is running for the Northampton County executive position in Pennsylvania. Let's hear what he has to say.
I plan on going in these school boards. Ian and other strong men. Men, where are you? Men, wake up, smell the coffee. Let's go. Make men great again, right? Make men again. Let's go. Men, I need you in the coming weeks because when we walk into those school boards, we're going to have everything we need to do to go in there with those 9 school boards that voted to put these masks back on the children with no scientific. It's done giving them the research and the data. Do you understand that? Forget going into these school boards and bringing data. You go into school boards to remove them. That's what you do. They don't follow the law. They don't follow the law. You go in and you remove them. I'm going in with 20 strong men. I'm going to speak in front of the school board and I'm going to give them an option. They can leave or they can be removed. And then after that, we're going to replace them with nine parents, and we're going to vote down the mask mandates that evening. That evening. This is how you get stuff done. Forget writing your legislators. Forget it. They're not listening. You got to do something. It's us. It's we the people. When I see criminals trying to take my rights and my beautiful children and everything that they're going to do, you're going to have to take my life. There's no way. I'll die on this hill. There's no way. No way.
So there you have it. This is one of many stories involving right-wingers who are either running for political office or are in political office or in other positions of power, essentially advocating for the use of violence toward those who implement policies during the pandemic that are meant to keep people safe, but they just happen to disagree with. Now, he's free to take his children out of the schools if he doesn't want them masked, but he doesn't have the right. Like, here's the other thing, right? What about parents who want their children to wear masks? What about those parents?
Yeah.
Because there are more of those parents compared to idiots who want to keep kids unsafe or want to risk the lives of educators by doing away with mask mandates. I should note, by the way, that 8 out of the 10 Northampton County schools, school districts have implemented mask mandates. Maybe that's why he's so fired up, or maybe he's just using this as his culture war issue of choice as he campaigns for this position.
Yeah, he says that's the hill I'll die on. Well, that might be literal. 4 conservative talk show hosts died this week. They were all against vaccines. They didn't take them, and they got coronavirus, and they died. And one called himself Mr. Anti-Vax. Mr. Anti-Vax is dead because he made a terrible mistake of not taking the vaccine. I don't know, we're supposed to have sympathy for them, whatever. They poisoned the minds of all their listeners. They said over and over again how vaccines, they made fun of vaccines. They said it was freedom. But look, you tell conservative media, seatbelts are a form of tyranny. We'll have thousands of right-wingers flying out of their windshields within the year. I'm not joking. If they did it, if Tucker Carlson did it, Trump did it, Alex Jones did it, those conservative talk show hosts did it, they'd all stop wearing seatbelts and they'd all start flying out of windshields. They'll believe anything that these conservative media says, anything.
The seatbelt argument I don't really like because, first of all, you should wear a seatbelt. I agree with seatbelt laws, clearly. But if you decide you don't want to wear a seatbelt and you get into a car accident and you die as a result, you die as a result of your actions, right? What these clowns are advocating for is doing away with easy measures that are meant to keep people safe during a pandemic that deals with a highly contagious virus, right? So, look, you want to drink bleach, I don't really care. Right? I don't, I genuinely don't. That guy wants to do whatever he wants to do that only affects himself, I don't care. But when your actions could get other people killed, that's when you care. That's when I care.
Anna, I got you, but I use it as an example because it's so easy to understand. And you know what, I did it on social media earlier today. And you know what happened? A bunch of right-wingers started saying, yeah, wait a minute, why do we need seatbelts? That is a little bit of
Really, they never thought about that? So is prosecution for drunk driving also tyranny? In their minds?
Anything where they don't get to do whatever they want. consent is tyranny to them. I want my freedom. I want to endanger you because I'm a petulant little, you know what you are. So now back to this guy. He seems obsessed with strong men. He's like, oh, I want those strong men. I want them so bad. Okay, whatever, dude. Bring them to your 20 strong men to your own house and do whatever you guys want to do in that house, okay? But going around saying, hey, let's go physically remove the board members? No, that's a direct threat on specific people. That is illegal. Do we have laws in this country? Do we have any laws left? This is total anarchy because the government will not enforce laws against right-wingers. It is such a specific and insane exception. Everyone has to follow the law unless you're a right-winger, in which case you could threaten violence, you could do violence, you could do anything you want, you're above the law. And guys, maybe what this has done is exposed it, that it's been this way all along. We didn't know, we thought the laws applied to all of us. Maybe, I guess the right wingers, especially the ones in power, they've been ignoring the laws all along, going, those aren't for us. Yep. Those are for brown people and women and people we don't like. We're not gonna follow the laws if we do. Write your legislators. He said, don't write your legislators, that's democracy. No, be a thug, be a criminal, be a brown shirt. Go and physically assault people you don't agree with. We're right-wingers, we don't give a damn about democracy. We're just a bunch of thugs. You know what you should do with those thugs? Put them in jail. That's where that guy belongs. That was a clear threat. And the reality is, apparently law enforcement and governments, mayors, governors, they're all cowards. Oh my God, if I arrest a right-winger, the rest of them will cry. So what? Let them cry. They're weak. They like to cry for a living. Let them cry in the corner of a jail cell if they break the law.
Exactly. Well, he's not the only one. Our second story of the day involving an anti-mask violence supporter is Jeffrey Lefkowitz. So let's talk about what he did recently. Oftentimes when we talk about anti-vaxxers or anti-maskers advocating for violence against government officials who implement various mandates, we talk about it as if it only takes place in red states or places that conservatives reside. But fact of the matter is, you see all sorts of craziness everywhere in the country, including Santa Monica, California, where a man named Jason Lefkowitz, an anti-masker, made direct threats to the city council members ahead of a vote regarding mask mandates. In fact, he called for a civil war in case the measure passes during an anti-mask protest. Let's watch.
List of all the council people's homes that are voting on the vaccine mandate. Okay? Whoever votes yes, we're coming to your door. We're coming to your home. You want to feel intimidated? You want to intimidate us? We're coming to you now. We're coming to you. This is no WWE satire. This is real life. You're messing with children, and I don't stand for that. You're on this list. You're gonna see our faces for a week until you do the right thing. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Better. What's going on Monday, right? I guess it's Monday, so Monday's the first vote. If it's unanimous, we lost. But I do believe there's council people that do have a conscience and a soul, and they're gonna vote no, which then gives us 1 week, and then it's just a majority. It's just a majority. It could be 8-7, and we lose everything. So we have to make sure we change at least 2, 3, 4, 5 votes. It'd be nice if it was unanimous our way. What happens if it passes? Civil war. Yeah. Civil war. That's what's gonna happen. In a month, in 2 months, by December, civil war's coming, people. Get your guns. Get your guns, get your food. Get a plan together. It's done.
Get your guns. Civil war over mask mandates. We're gonna show up to the homes of various city council members who vote in favor of a mask mandate. I mean, and if you're wondering who this guy is, he has had run-ins with the law in the past. Back in 2011, he was arrested at a pretty popular restaurant in downtown LA known as Bodega Louie. Witnesses said that he was raided at his work during a dinner service. He's rumored to, apparently he made some sort of plea deal. So he's rumored to have been a rat or whatever for working with prosecutors in that case. But nonetheless, this is obviously a dangerous guy who's advocating for violence, and he's not the only one. And it doesn't matter where you are in the country. You see this garbage everywhere, unfortunately.
So I was wondering, well, like, what do these guys do for a living? Do they do anything? And I found out in this case, man, this makes so much sense now. He's a failed comedian. Because failed comedians apparently turn right-wing and turn crazy. And so this failed comedian is out there. By the way, the other failed comedian, yeah, I'm referring to Jimmy Dore, talked, and we showed you the speech at the Medicare for All rally, talked about going to the homes of Justice Democrat legislators and scaring them. Two failed comedians, both with the same grift about violence, and oh, the government's lying to you, and Jimmy's pushing ivermectin, and oh, horse paste is the answer. Don't believe the doctors. Give me money, right?
No, let me quote him specifically. He said, "Show up to their homes and make them scared to death of you."
Okay, so that was Jimmy, and now this Jason Lefkowitz guy is saying, let's go to their homes of this specific people he mentioned. Civil war, if you say, hey, I'm worried about a civil war coming, that's one thing. It's another thing when you say, go grab your guns later, he said, grab your knives. Grab guns and knives, and then you mention specific people. Is there law enforcement in this country? That's in the middle of LA. Is there law enforcement here? When black people protest for civil rights, I see law enforcement everywhere. I see tanks in the streets. These guys are saying, grab guns and knives, let's go do violence. Can't find law enforcement.
Right.
Can't find them anywhere, okay? So look, guys, if we don't have law enforcement, you're encouraging violence. Because people are gonna see that video, and they're gonna see all these videos all across the country of right-wingers calling for violence. They're gonna say, oh, I guess violence is okay if you're a right-winger. Let's go kill people.
Totally, I mean, they're in being complicit or standing back and refusing to investigate these cases. It gives a giant green light to people who want to carry out violence, right? It creates a sense of lawlessness, and we see it playing out in places like Portland, Oregon, for instance. You know, we did that interview regarding the violence that occurred between Proud Boys and left-wing counter-protesters, and the police very intentionally decided to stand back. They're like, nah, we don't really have the resources to deal with this, so have at it.
Yeah, it's unreal, man.
And there was a shooting, by the way, during all of that.
For God's sake, man, Democrats, if you run a blue state or a city, can you actually do your goddamn job and get control of this anarchy? We're not asking you to take away people's freedom. That's insane conspiratorial nonsense from right-wingers. But now 28% of the Republicans say they are ready for violence. 40% say that they should take the law into their own hands. And then you've got people in the streets saying, let's go grab our guns and knives and start killing people. And God damn it, there's no law enforcement. You're encouraging violence every single day.
Yep, that's exactly right. All right, so in the bonus episode today, we have a ton of stories I can't wait to share with you all. So if you're not a member, please become one by clicking on that join button to become a YouTube member, or you can go to youtube.com/join and become a member that way. So we're gonna talk a little bit about Senator Rand Paul's lies in regard to COVID, and also things like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. I mean, you have a US senator pushing out propaganda that only harms Americans right now. We're also going to show you a video of a journalist in Afghanistan who appears to be held hostage by the Taliban as he claims that everything is A-okay. So I want to show that video and more. So it's going to be a great bonus episode. We have some fun light stories as well, including a couple who got married and decided to send an invoice to guests who RSVP'd but didn't show up.
That's a crazy story.
I love it, it's one of my favorite stories.
So you guys know the ways to become members, tyt.com/join. You could hit the join button below if you're on YouTube, super easy. And then there's Jeff Bezos is providing free membership accidentally to us through Twitch at tyt.com/prime. But you gotta re-up every month. Please take the 30 seconds to sign up and 10 seconds to re-up every month. If you have Amazon Prime, it's totally free for you. And please, if you can, since it's free, if you're already a member, do that on top. That would be amazing. Okay, now I want to squeeze in two facts I didn't get to in this show here. One is in Florida, 44,000 people have died of coronavirus. Over 1,700 people died just last week, okay? And they're almost like the majority of them, the clear majority of them are Republicans. They're killing off their own voters. It's the most insane political suicide I have ever seen, in this case, quite literally. So there's no end to the madness of coronavirus. Now on the hurricanes, I noticed as you were doing the story, we talked about how poor people also can't afford to leave.
Right.
Right? And I remember that story that I tell about when I didn't leave in Miami. I remembered I made $24,000 a year at that time. Part of the reason I didn't leave is because I didn't have money for a hotel.
Yeah, where are you going to go? Exactly.
Exactly. All right, we'll talk more about it in the bonus episode. Members, we'll see you there in a minute.
So a lot of progressive office holders are doing something fun. I like fun. They're doing the last 2 years in 2 minutes. Okay, we're gonna try it here. First, I wanna let you guys know about the years before that. Hey, remember we started the Just Democrats here on the Young Turks. It was officially launched on our air, basically by you guys. And then we featured AOC, we featured Cori Bush, and Ro Khanna became the first ever Just Democrat incumbent, all on the Young Turks. Now, the last 2 years have been a spectacular follow-up to that. So let's put the 2 minutes on the clock and do this. Young Turks got to start back in 2002, and I think we've been an important part of the progressive movement ever since. What we mainly do is amplify the progressive voice and candidates out there, and I think we've done a pretty good job. Right now, we're currently #1 most engaged news politics network online, beating CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC, all of them. We're #1 in total minutes watched. That means not only the number of people watching, but how long they watch. We just crossed 20 million followers and 500 million monthly views. Now, why? That's because actually the country's progressive. It's 2/3 progressive. And you guys have allowed us to be your voice, and we're incredibly thankful for that. So what did we do with that voice? Well, let's look at 2019. We went all over the country talking to you guys and the candidates. So we were in Miami, we were in Detroit, we were in Houston, and we were in Iowa. In fact, we were all over Iowa. You guys were all over Iowa, and all of the candidates saw you guys. We had wonderful people speaking, like the one and only Nina Turner at our rallies. Bernie Sanders stopped by, Andrew Yang, Elizabeth Warren. We interviewed almost everyone on the campaign trail, with the exception of Biden and Buttigieg. And we held them accountable. We even did a progressive economic pledge, and so many wonderful people signed on to that. Bernie Sanders, Warren, Marianne Williamson, AOC, the entire squad, Justice Democrats, and so many others. Now, on top of all that, we started a show called The Conversation, where we featured so many progressive thinkers, writers, and candidates. And one of the candidates we featured in 2019 was Jamal Bowman. Here comes Jamal Bowman. Then we had an amazing 2020. We hired a climate reporter. Damage Report passed 500,000 subscribers. Young Turks passed 5 million subscribers. We're getting the message out to more and more people. Bernie Sanders comes on in the heat of the primary. He comes on after the election to say what we're gonna do for the future. And then Marie Newman wins. Jamal Bowman wins. Cori Bush wins. And then just when you thought it couldn't get any better, here comes Nina Turner. Hello, somebody. And she's running for Congress, and she comes on the Young Turks first. On election week, we had nearly 2 million hours of viewing. We're #1 destination for progressives. You made all that happen. This is amazing, and thank you for those 2 years. What, I went past 2 minutes? Of course!
Viewers had asked for an interview with the TYT Lizard. Mr. Lizard. Oh, you changed colors today. Nice. I don't even know how you feel about us. Do you even like us?
Well, you guys made me this awesome house, so I'm kind of in your debt. I was found outside on the street, and you gave me a home. Granted, it was a really crappy home for a while, but then through the power of fundraising, I became a person who has a multi-level Trump-style mansion.
You do. By the way, you never looked better, man. Normally, you're just green or just brown, but today you're in mid-lizard, right?
I'm not very smart. I'm a lizard, so I don't know how the science works. I guess this is just my mood. It's not every day that thresholds like this are broken. I'm just so excited. I can't contain my pigmentation.
And now you're showing it off.
Yep.
Yeah, I've never seen the lizard like this before. back on TYT, Jen Canano with you guys. We got a lot of stories in the bonus episode.
Yeah, a lot of stories.
Let's do them.
Stories, yeah. Okay, so let's start with Rand Paul. So, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul has decided that his culture war issue is COVID-19, and so he continues to push out disinformation that only helps to harm people, including his own constituents. So recently, he decided to go after the media and also healthcare professionals who are cautioning Americans who have been sold this idea that ivermectin is a COVID-19 treatment. It in fact is not a COVID-19 treatment. It is a treatment for parasitic infections in the intestinal tract, for things like roundworm, for instance, right? And so doesn't matter, when he was speaking at a town hall recently, he said that the hatred for Trump deranged these people so much that they're unwilling to objectively study it. Not true, it has been studied. So someone like me that's in the middle of it, I can't tell you because they will not study ivermectin. That's not true, they have. They will not study hydroxychloroquine. That's not true, they have, without the taint of their hatred for Donald Trump. Now, let me be clear, there are many bad things to say about Donald Trump. Luckily though, while he did push for hydroxychloroquine, as far as I know, he has not pushed for ivermectin. Now, there were studies into both drugs, and those studies indicated that they were not effective treatments for coronavirus. So, let's actually fast forward to this graphic regarding the studies that were done on hydroxychloroquine. A study in Brazil was halted early for safety reasons after coronavirus patients taking a higher dose of hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine developed irregular heart rates that increased their risk of a potentially fatal heart arrhythmia. Roughly half of the study participants were given a low dose of chloroquine, while the rest were prescribed a high dose. Within 3 days, researchers started noticing heart arrhythmias in patients taking the higher dose. By the 6th day of treatment, 11 patients had died, leading to an immediate end to the high dose segment of the trial. Now, other studies indicated that it was not effective in treating coronavirus, which is why it is not being used as a treatment for coronavirus. There are other drugs that are being used, like Regeneron, for instance, for those who have been unfortunately hospitalized because they refuse to get the coronavirus vaccine, which prevents hospitalizations. But this is incredibly irresponsible behavior from an elected lawmaker, especially someone in the United States Senate. But hey, it's Rand Paul, so what can you expect?
So these right-wingers, I get frustrated at the media for taking them seriously. I get it, he's a United States Senator. And Lindsey Graham's a United States Senator. Lindsey Graham out there saying, hey, we should impeach Biden because my defense contractor donors want more war. And then they have to take him seriously. Oh, what do you think? Why do you think he should be impeached? Let's have a real debate about it, as if he's a legitimate actor. Rand Paul, oh, they've done no studies. You know the National Institute of Health did a study, and so did Oxford. And then Rand Paul comes out and lies to you. And Rand Paul's not a dumb guy. There's plenty of dumb guys in the Republican Party, but Rand Paul's not one of them. It's very likely, either he did no research, which would be, for a right winger normally would be normal, okay? But in his case, I'd be surprised. I think he's lying to you on purpose.
Yeah,
he
100%.
Thinks, yeah, they're not gonna look up the Oxford study. I'm just gonna tell them they didn't do a study. And I'm gonna say, oh, they didn't do it because of Trump. That'll seem believable. Besides, my voters are schmucks, so it's so easy to trick them. And then I won't say take ivermectin. I'll just tell you that they're discriminating against ivermectin because of Trump derangement syndrome. And then they'll all take ivermectin, and then I'll get elected to further office because if you're not crazy in the Republican Party, you'll lose a primary. And I don't want to lose my primary, and I want to run for president again. And I want to tell them I'm the craziest son of a bitch there is. I'm dumber than DeSantis, I'm dumber than Greg Abbott, I'm dumber than anyone who's gonna run, because that's my best chance of winning in the Republican Party. And Rand Paul knows it, he knows it. So they've studied those things. And guys, look at that chloroquine study. 11 dead in 6 days at the higher dosages. So they had to call it off. They're like, oh my God, this kills people, right? You know how people die from ivermectin? Anna just told me this during the break. Look, I know that it's to treat parasites in your intestines. And so at the low dosages, if you have tapeworm, you could use it on humans. In the higher dosages, they use it on cattle and horses. And that's what now a lot of folks are grabbing, and it's making them really sick. Apparently, some of them crap themselves to death.
Yeah.
because it's cleaning out their intestines and they're taking too high a dosage. So they crap themselves to death, believing in monsters like Rand Paul, who thinks, well, I get it, I told you earlier in Florida, over 1,700 people died just last week. So by the way, mostly Republicans. So Rand Paul thinks, I know, a couple of thousand of my voters will die, maybe in Kentucky. Across the country, tens of thousands of our voters will die. But hey, it'll help my political career by a little bit. So I'll go out there and lie to them on purpose because I'm a monster. That's who Rand Paul is.
Exactly, and look at them, and look at Rand Paul tying the very truthful pushback against ivermectin to Trump derangement syndrome when Trump hasn't advocated for the use of ivermectin. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump. It has everything to do with the fact that it is not a proven treatment for COVID-19. In fact, the one and only study that showed that it could have some benefits had to be withdrawn because of fraud in the study. In fact, one of the study authors very clearly stated on Twitter, this study has been withdrawn because of medical fraud. No one should be citing it as a reason to take ivermectin. But who cares? Who cares? Let's just say that it's Trump derangement syndrome. By the way, the CDC's numbers showed that from early July through August 13th, pharmacies filled more than 88,000 prescriptions of ivermectin. Okay, so all right, I mean, that's the situation we're dealing with right now, where an elected lawmaker who's supposed to be representing the best interests of his constituents is literally lying to them, knowing full well that it could get them killed. But who cares? Who cares?
So Rand Paul's best defense is, I'm an idiot and I didn't know about any of the studies, and I went out there and told people because I'm an ignorant jackass and I didn't even bother checking and I'm lazy and you should fire me. That's his best defense. But why do we think he's lying on purpose and not just ignorant? Well, he knows that Trump hasn't said anything about ivermectin. That we know for sure. Plus, vaccines, Trump's the one that authorized Operation Warp Speed to create vaccines as quickly as possible. And Rand Paul definitely knows that, but yet he's out there slanging ivermectin and he's doing it in a legalese way. That's where you know he's a slimeball liar. I didn't say to take ivermectin. I was just saying, if you don't take ivermectin, it's part of Trump derangement syndrome. Oh, they're not studying it. It's so legitimate. They should be studying it more. I didn't say to take it, you weasel. You liar. So this is the Republican Party leadership now, a bunch of monsters.
All right, let's switch gears and talk a little bit about what's taking place in Afghanistan. Yes, this is a heavy post game so far. I promise we'll lighten it up in just a minute. But this video has been making its rounds and I wanted to talk about it briefly. So, a video from the Afghan TV press conference shows a reporter who appears to be in a bit of a hostage situation. And honestly, my question is, why did the Taliban think it was a good idea to appear in the video the way that they did as they're trying to convince, everyone across the planet that they're changed and they totally believe in giving people rights? I don't know. Let's watch.
به نام خدا با عرض سلام و درود بر شما بیننده های شبکه جهانی افغانستان. به ویژه برنامه پرداز باز هم شما را خوش آمدید میگویم. میربایس حیدری حق دوست هستم شما را دعوت میکنم تا پایان این برنامه با ما همراه باشین. حالا که نظام اشرف غنی سقوط کرده و آقای غنی از افغانستان فرار کرده و در افغانستان ایده‌ای که منتقد اشرف غنی هستند میگویند که رئیس جمهور فراری و مردم تنها گذاشت و خودشان رفتند و حالا امارت اسلامی برگشته.
So again, that was during a Afghan TV press conference, and the reporter or the journalist there is telling people that they shouldn't be afraid of the Taliban. Apparently, their preferred name is Islamic Emirate. I'm going to keep calling them the Taliban, and that they should cooperate and not be afraid. So look, I don't really have much to say about this. The Taliban's awful, right? I know it, you know it, the American people know it, but if they're trying to launder their reputation and pretend like they want to give people rights, I mean, they could be off camera holding their weapons, right? Because of course they're gonna hold the guy hostage. But like, why did they think it was, like, they're so dumb.
Yeah, so I have a couple things to say about this. One is that I was genuinely curious if they were so unaware of everything else in the world because everybody lives in their own bubble and it's apparently impossible to escape your own perspective. And so if they thought, oh, this is good PR, like we'll tell everybody, we'll make the anchor say to everybody that you're safe while having two lunatics behind them. Look at their eyes. Like, what's wrong with their eyes?
I don't know.
Right? There's nothing wrong with it's not an Afghan thing. I mean, the presenter's perfectly fine. These guys like wig out on their eyes for a while. And let's have them with guns on the screen telling everybody that, or did they mean it? Did they like wink, wink, haha, everybody's safe. You better do what we're gonna say, otherwise we're gonna kill you. It's not beyond the Taliban, that's Taliban 101.
Yep.
So I don't know that we're ever gonna get the answer to that, but I am genuinely curious if there was someone who intended it, or afterwards they're like, oh, look at that. Nobody could have seen that coming. They thought that they're less safe because of that, huh? Right?
No, I know. I actually think it's the latter because I'll give you an example of something else that they did. You know, one of the headlines today was Taliban says that they will allow women to study at universities, right? But they don't allow women to be in the same room as men, meaning that women would have to be segregated in classes without men. Okay, but that, by the way, includes the educator. The professors have to be women as well. But there are no female professors in Afghanistan under the system, right? So in effect, women are not able to get an education in Afghanistan. Right, so they care about the PR. They care about making it appear as though like no, we're totally different now. We're the new and improved Taliban. But come on, like we all know what the truth is. Now, does that mean that we keep boots on the ground and continue on with this forever war that has been a complete and utter disaster? No, all we've done is empower the Taliban with more weaponry. I mean, there's this list going around the internet right now that includes all of the sophisticated military weaponry that we gave to the Afghan military, the now defunct Afghan military, which then ended up in the Taliban's hands. And by the way, initially the United States created the Taliban by fighting the Soviets when they had occupied Afghanistan. And so like anyone who's like, oh, the Taliban's so evil, we need to stay there, don't listen to them because they don't actually care about doing anything about the Taliban. We've been there for 20 years and we've failed miserably in propping up a government. But at the same time, let's just be clear, Taliban is not good and they're not new and improved in any way.
Yeah, so I think there's a second point I want to make here. So our media is just better at marketing. So now when they hear me say that, they'll be outraged. What do you mean we don't have people with guns standing behind us? Well, you do bring on former generals who are defense contractors and they have much bigger weapons. Come on, Jake. No, I'm serious.
I know, but doing that comparison is ridiculous.
It's not at all ridiculous. Those guys that go on MSNBC and CNN
I know,
create much more violence than the Taliban.
They're not holding people hostage.
Well, the way that they do hold people, our news media hostage, is they give them millions of dollars in advertising. And then they go, and then they say, by the way, and they say, no, hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. They say, if you don't support wars, we're gonna withdraw that money from you. So that's a smarter, more subtle, better marketing way of causing much greater violence. So hey, we'll just bribe you to do it, and our weapons are way bigger than the Taliban's weapons, and we'll invade Iraq, we'll invade, based on all those generals and all those defense contractors that are all over television. And we'll tell you 20 years of occupation of Afghanistan was wonderful, leaving was terrible. But we're smarter, so our generals wear crisp suits and they come in and they go, they never tell you about the $1 million that they're getting from defense contractors, and they never tell you any of that, and they start much bigger wars with much bigger violence. So yeah, maybe the Morning Joe and Jake Tapper don't have thugs with guns standing behind them, but they bring in thugs who started much bigger wars. And they don't tell you that they're getting paid by defense contractors, and they lie to you on purpose, and they market for more and more wars. So it doesn't make the Taliban better, it makes us, at least we should question ourselves as to how our media operates and who holds the proverbial gun to their heads, which is in this case not a violent one, but one that has a financial trigger. Either Lockheed Martin and Boeing and Raytheon advertise with you, or they don't. So shut up, Jake. and tell everybody how great war is, and have my boy on here to tell people how great war is. So give us credit, we're more sophisticated.
All right, let's move on to some lighter stuff. Although the heart of the story is not so light, there was something light that came out of it. So, a Fox News reporter who was reporting on Hurricane Ida in Louisiana decided to go outside, put himself in danger to show Americans what high winds look like. Let's take a look at the video.
We've had gusts up to almost 90 miles an hour, sustained over 60. And the second I step out, you're going to see, I'm trying to get back, but I just want to show you the power of this wind right now, very close to the Mississippi River. This is no joke, folks. Everything outside in New Orleans right now, in many spots, is unraveling.
No one needed that. Like, no one asked for it, no one needed it. Like, that was Robert Ray. I'm sure he's a perfectly fine guy, and I know I'm being too salty about this. But like, I'm sick of the reporters who are like, oh my God, we're gonna show you what the winds look like by standing outside in the wind. No, we know. We can see the plants behind you. Like, we know, we know what that looks like. We don't need you to put yourself in danger to like show what a great journalist you are and what you're willing to do to get the information out there. Like 90-mile-per-hour winds, pretty strong winds, very strong. When it came to this hurricane, up to 150-mile-per-hour winds. I think most people can understand what that means. I don't know.
Okay, so I'll tell you the reason why they do it, and then I'll tell you the funniest part of this video. You're seeing it, but I'm not sure you're seeing it. So they do it because the reporters get famous when they do this. So they've done this in all the hurricanes, and every time there's some guy who goes and stands in the middle of the hurricane while telling you not to stand in the middle of the hurricane, and that clip goes viral, and everybody covers it, and then they become mini celebrities, and then that helps their career a lot. And the next job they get pays more, and they get more and more famous. That's literally why they do it. Even though it's just, now here's the funniest part: that guy's totally fine.
No,
Did you see that guy? He's probably a producer. This guy's hamming it up. The producer goes out there. He doesn't get blown away, and then he comes back in perfectly fine.
No, I love it. No, like, and by the way, the producer, like this guy, look, if what motivates this behavior is what you say it is, and I think that there is truth behind what you're saying. Like, poor producer, right? Like, he's got to deal with this crap. As the on-air reporter is trying to make
watch.
Yeah.
No problem at all.
Yeah, he's like, all right, okay, clown, fine. I'm right here. Don't worry. If you fly away, I'll protect you. And he does. He's like basically protecting him from flying away. It's just like, no one asked for this, bro. Like, just, and by the way, right before the video starts, he says something about like, oh, we had to evacuate to this garage and this and that, and then he immediately follows it with, I'm gonna go outside and show you how windy it is. Like, just come on.
So when Ben and I started the show with Ben Mankiewicz, and when we were in Miami, we were covering hurricanes, and to mock reporters like this, we had somebody before the hurricane started say, Ben, the hurricane's already here. And we put a giant fan on them and started throwing water on them, and it kind of looked real, right? And then we panned out and showed you the fan. Because of course you don't need to be in the middle of it. And of course, every time, the ironic thing is they tell you, this is why you shouldn't be out here. Then what are you doing out there? So
the reason why they do it is like, look, the story is not supposed to be about you. And clearly they're making the story about them.
Yeah.
So when they say that, it's an effort to like cover the real reason they're doing it, right? Yeah. No. We just want to demonstrate how dangerous it is, so it discourages you from doing it. It's like, don't insult your audience. They get it. Like people aren't like, woo, 150-mile-per-hour winds, I'm gonna go outside. Like, come on.
Yeah.
It's dumb. It's like the walk and talk. Where are you guys walking to? Just sit down and have the damn conversation, okay?
I totally agree with you. Local news is hilarious, guys. I don't know that anybody watches local news anymore, but if you don't, like, you should, and I should do this too. Just dip in every once in a while. You'll see, it's hilarious. My favorite is normally 9 out of 10 times they don't have a hurricane or some disaster, right? And they're late to the scene. So they'll say, earlier today, there was a car crash behind me. Well, it's not there anymore, so why are you there? Like there's nothing you're showing a perfectly normal highway, a perfectly normal building. Earlier today would have been interesting. Today, right now, is not interesting. But we're here anyway because we were told that we need to do live shots.
Yep. Super goofy. All right, we have time for the story that we've all been waiting for, / I've been waiting for, and it's the wedding flakes. So let's talk about it. A couple has started a controversy, okay, regarding an invoice they sent to their wedding guests who did not, in fact, show up to the wedding that they RSVP'd for. Now, this was a destination wedding. The couple apparently on multiple occasions confirmed the RSVP list. You're gonna come, right? You're gonna come, right? Because the way weddings work is if people say they're gonna come and you have a space for them at the reception, you gotta pay for that plate no matter what. No matter what. And sometimes plates can be between 150 to 200 bucks. And so this couple is like, nah, bunch of people didn't show up. We're gonna invoice them. This is a Chicago couple who had their wedding in Jamaica, which sounds amazing. I would have gone.
Yeah, well, that sounds terrific.
Yeah, and so here's the invoice, a photo of the invoice that they sent to people who didn't show up. And so in this case, they invoiced a total of $240. Apparently, Doug Simmons and Deborah McGee are the couple here. And a bunch of people who RSVP'd didn't show up. I think about 8 people who had RSVP'd did not end up coming to the wedding. I mean, there is a pandemic happening. I don't know if that played a role at all. But the invoice reads as follows. This invoice is being sent to you because you confirmed seats at the wedding reception during the final head count. The amount above is the cost of your individual seats because you didn't call or give us proper notice that you wouldn't be in attendance. This amount is what you owe us for paying for your seats in advance. So the newlyweds, according to this report, were recently married in Jamaica, as we mentioned. So they had to pay for each seat beforehand. While 109 people were invited, only 108 showed up. So
101 showed up.
I'm sorry, 101 showed up, my bad. So 8 people, I meant to say, did not come, even though they RSVP'd and said that they would come. But after repeated RSVPs, those 8 guests didn't tell the Simmons that they weren't attending. The couple had already paid the resort roughly $120 per person for the unused seats. So Cenk, what do you think about sending an invoice to people who don't show up for the wedding, even though they've RSVP'd?
Yeah, so first, it should be known the groom says that he didn't actually send the invoice, that he put it on social media to shame them so that they would pay him anyway, and which apparently they did. So that's what he claims. But really, does it make a difference if you sent the invoice or you put it on Facebook and publicly shame them?
I think the Facebook method might be worse, to be honest, right? Yeah, like, look, go ahead.
So I'm an expert on this because I did a destination wedding. Okay.
Expert.
Please.
Noted wedding expert, Cenk Uygur.
Of course. And so a destination wedding in Miami. So it sounds fancy, right? The reason we did it is because my wife is originally from Taiwan. So people were coming, and I'm originally from New Jersey. So people were coming from LA, New Jersey, Taiwan, and Turkey. And we're like, well, they're all gonna have to go somewhere. And by the way, there's politics involved. If you pick New Jersey, it seems like, oh, then you're favoring the groom, you pay, et cetera. You get it, right? So
I know about that.
You get rid of all the politics, you pick a neutral destination, you go to Miami. And we kept the cost as reasonable as we could, so I felt good about that. But when you invite people to a destination wedding, you have to understand that you're asking them to inconvenience themselves to some degree. I mean, maybe if they're going to Jamaica, they're going to Miami, they might be having a lot of fun and not inconveniencing themselves, but you're asking them to make a trek. So first of all, if they say no, you can't catch feelings. You're like, oh, so you didn't fly from LA to Miami for my wedding? Yeah, they didn't because you held it in Miami.
I think that's one of the main reasons why people have destination weddings. Like they don't want to have a massive wedding with a bunch of randos that like their parents force them to invite, right? Destination wedding is a good way to weed out people that you don't really want at your wedding, but you feel obligated to invite.
Okay, well that's another way to phrase it and frame it. So, and then if people don't show up, of course they didn't show up because there's flights that are delayed, this, that, million other things. You don't invoice them, that's insane. if you do a destination wedding, you have to put into your mind it's going to cost this much, and some people aren't going to show up, and then live with it. If like you can't ask people to go through all that stuff and then expect perfect attendance, and if you don't get perfect attendance, oh yeah, I invited you to my wedding and you said you were going to go through this tremendous pain in the ass of going all the way to another country to attend my wedding, but at the last second, because of COVID or whatever, you could change your mind or couldn't make it. That's it. I'm gonna shame you.
I'm gonna extend this to all weddings, whether they be destination weddings or not, mostly because if you decide you want to have a wedding, you have to expect and accept, okay, this is the unwritten rule, that you're wasting a ton of money.
Yes.
Like, that's the whole point of a wedding. That's what a wedding is. It's a giant waste of money. And by the way, I should know, I had a giant wedding, and did I waste a lot of money? Yeah, I did. But on the wedding day, when all these little things went wrong and people who said they were gonna show up didn't show up, you know what I decided to do? Get drunk and have a great time. And then I forgot about it. That's the way weddings are supposed to be. Like, you have to go in expecting and accepting the fact that it's a giant waste of money. But we wanna know what you guys think. Here's the question: was the couple justified in sending invoices to guests who didn't show up to their destination wedding? Very easy poll, yes or no. You can take part by going to tyt.com/polls. We wanna know what you guys think.
Because some people might say, no, then why'd you tell me 4 times that you were coming? And that cost me a lot of money. I'm already in the hole here and you're killing me.
People suck, you gotta accept that too.
Yeah.
And get over it. I mean, it is what it is.
So, well, we'll see how you guys rule on it. Curious about that. Okay, you guys, we're out of time. And this is really cool, actually. Make sure you're definitely going to Big Rick Energy on twitch.tv/TYT. It's on right now because he's got Gwen Berry on. Remember, she did the protest and then Dan Crenshaw attacked her. She's the Olympic hammer thrower. So that's super cool guest on with Rick Strom on Big Rick Energy. Go check it out right now. And don't forget Old School at 10 o'clock Eastern. See you then.